So we're going to go ahead and get started. It is Monday, April 5th, 6 p.m. on the dot. This is the Town of Rutland Select Board meeting. I declare this meeting open. At this point in the meeting, I will entertain a motion to waive the reading of the remote meeting instructions.
So moved.
Whitman seconds.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings.
Stillings, aye.
Whitman.
Whitman, aye.
Nichols.
Nichols, aye.
And Resity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have minutes, treasury warrant, payroll. Entertain a motion for the approval of treasury warrant 21-W20 and payroll 21-PW20.
So moved, Stillings.
Second.
Whitman seconds.
Have a Whitman second. That being any further discussion, hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote, please. Stillings.
Stillings, aye.
Whitman.
Whitman, aye.
Nichols.
Nichols, aye.
And Resity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Next, we have approval of meeting minutes from the 22nd of March. I'll entertain a motion for the approval of those.
So moved.
I didn't read it. I didn't get a chance to read it.
Whitman seconds.
So Jeff, did you want to, we can either hold it, or if you want to approve it, you can of course recuse yourself, or if you have any changes at a later date, I think you've been amenable to Tamiko changing that if you notice anything that's out of place. So it's up to you on how you want to vote, but those are your options.
Yeah, I didn't get it on my town email. Was it sent out at all?
Yeah, it's in the shared drive for the meeting.
Yeah.
So again, I'll leave it up to you. I have a motion, second, and we'll have a roll call. Stillings.
Stillings, aye.
Whitman.
Whitman, aye.
Nichols.
Nichols, aye.
City, aye. Motion carries unanimous. All right, and we got a bunch of people in here for different items. I'm gonna, if it's okay with the board, take a few of them out of order to be respectful and mindful of our department heads and other folks that are in here for different reasons. We do have first that we have to take because it was pre-scheduled, a public hearing regarding Bryce Lemon Estates. This is required as part of the process that the board and the town needs to take in order to accept the layout of the road, which we would then need in order to put it on the warrant. As part of that process, the planning board had done their due diligence, as well as the town planner. It's my understanding that all the conditions have been met. The planning board is recommending this. Is that a correct assumption, Ron?
So the planning board has went through this. There's only one issue outstanding, and it's really not so much a land use issue as just getting a easement to a pump station. But all the basic land things and the road things are done except for that easement, which the developer will work on through the town meeting. There's a couple of different options, but Norman should be on this call. I've had a conversation with Norman. He says the remaining issue is minor, but I don't see Norm. Oh, there's Norm. So Norm, if you would just comment through you, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay.
Sorry, do we need to open the public hearing first?
Oh, yeah, you do. Yes.
Oh, I declare this public hearing open. I don't think we need a vote for that. Is my impression that I had done that. I apologize. So.
Yep.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if we needed to vote on it or not. Sorry, Mitch.
No. So if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, if Norm would comment about just making sure that the planning commission is okay with everything except for the easement.
Yeah, we voted to recommend acceptance, and at the time there were 5 or 6 minor issues yet to be dealt with. All except this one have been successfully completed. We got basically a clean slate from Quinn Engineering as far as all of the infrastructure and all of that sort of thing. Mr. Blair has offered at least a couple of solutions to the pump station issue, and at least planning board fully expects that will be resolved before town meeting. If not, we may have to change our recommendation.
Okay. So again, what we're have a hearing tonight. There are 2 steps that the board would need to take to get this on the warrant. The first would be to accept the layout, and the second would be to place it. So there is some time to where I'm sure the developer can provide us with an update as to that pump station prior to town meeting. Is there, at this point in time, I'd like to open this up because it is a hearing, to any members of the public that wish to be heard during the hearing, or any other members in attendance. If you so wish to be heard, please use the hand raise feature in your Zoom box, and Peter will alert us if there's anyone here to speak on that issue.
How do you use the hand raise thing? I apologize. I've never used that before.
You're asking the wrong person. I think it's under more on Zoom, and there's
It's under reactions at the bottom of the screen, Mr. Chairman.
I got it. Raise hand. Got it. Okay. Thank you, Ron.
all right. I see one hand raised. Clee, name and address, and go ahead.
Cleve Blair, 8 Heritage Hill Drive, Rutland. I wanted to say that later on this afternoon, we do have a solution. Probably not the best solution for the pump station issue. And I saw Director Buckley on there. Joe was on there just a second ago. I saw him pop up. So maybe he can chime in at the same time. I basically sent a letter saying that if for some reason we're not able to use the side entrance, that we'll put an entrance in the front. So the pump station, it will be resolved. You know, there's a solution, not the best solution, but there's a solution right now. And I met with the people once. They are very nice and were willing to work with me. I just haven't gotten back to them with a couple of different options that they were looking for. And I will do that tomorrow, and hopefully we can resolve it by then. But there is, if nothing else, if all else fails, I believe, and Joe can chime in anytime, that is there is a solution out there to take care of it.
Is there anyone else here from the public that would like to weigh in? I don't see any hands raised. Joe, Mr. Buckley, go ahead.
Just a couple quick comments through the chair. The pump station has the ability to pump wastewater. It's not going to cause anyone to lose sewer service. It's not an environmental hazard. We've cleared all of those issues at the facility. It's simply a question of, should something go wrong, having enough legal access to get to the facility. And plainly, it's either going to be an easement or come in from the street. That's all that's left to be resolved. There was some last minute changes in the layout of the road and the lots that have limited legal access. But again, it doesn't affect any of the functionality of the facility. Everyone still has wastewater service, and I don't anticipate you to have any environmental concerns.
Okay. All right, we're going to give one more opportunity because this has been a brief hearing for any members of the public. Any members of our board that have any questions or would like to weigh in prior to closing the hearing?
If I may, Mitch.
Hmm?
I think both Chief Knipe and Chief Monaco are on. I assume planning gives their pass, and it sounds like Director Buckley's his pass. I just wanted to confirm that police and fire, public safety are okay with everything also.
I'll leave it up to Nick and Seth's discretion whether they want to answer that. I'm not sure what part of that in the process that lies, but I think that goes through. Norm, does that go through the planning board process when you consult with public safety?
Yeah, we get input from the initial submission of the plans that you know, such things as fire hydrants and all of that sort of thing are done correctly, and we had no problems or no comments from them at that time. We don't go through a final process with police and fire on acceptance.
Understood. Okay. Any further questions? All right. Hearing none and seeing no hands up, I believe we need a motion to close the public hearing. Entertain that motion.
Motion to close, Stillings.
Second, Nichols.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings,
Stillings, based on planning board, aye.
Whitman,
Whitman, aye.
Nichols,
Nichols, aye.
or City, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Now there's two steps we need to take prior to having this on the warrant. One would be to accept the planning board's recommendation and vote to accept the layout. And this obviously would occur prior to putting it on the warrant. So I'll entertain a motion to accept the layout of phase 1 of Bryce Lemon Estates per planning board recommendation.
Can we hear the planning board's recommendation on that?
I'm sorry?
Through the chair, do we have a recommendation from the planning board on that second vote?
Norm, I'll defer.
You were sent a document explaining our recommendation. I don't remember the date, but I'm gonna say it was probably around 2 weeks ago.
Planning board recommends in the affirmative.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Dave George has his hand raised.
Mr. George, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to provide an answer to the question regarding the planning board's recommendation that was made on March 24, 2021. It was delivered to the select board by hand. It was made on the 23rd, delivered to the select board's office by hand on the 24th. The long and the short of it is it refers to a Quinn report. It refers to outstanding issues, and it refers to follow-up being necessary for those outstanding issues. So it was conditional upon those items, of which now we have clarification on the final outstanding issue.
So you're basically saying, Dave, that all of the issues minus the pump station issue, which we've heard from Director Buckley, Norm, and Clea are minor and going to be resolved. All of those other conditions placed on the acceptance have been resolved?
Yes, which is correct. And furthermore, there was a final, or actually not the final, but the most recent report from the consulting engineer indicating that there was resolve on all the items except for item 18. For item 18, we do have a letter that was also sent to the select board's office today, which lists the two possible solutions to that issue. So the select board should have all this information. We forwarded it as soon as we got it, and we worked diligently with the consulting engineer and the planning board and the developer to get this before the board in as final of a form as possible.
Great. Mr. Stillings.
Lastly, through the chair, town planner Dave, you're good with this?
Sorry?
You're good with this, David?
I mean, I drafted the planning board's recommendation, which was from the planning board itself. I think that is accurate. And the other items, as just indicated, there was other correspondence that came afterwards with a good effort to make sure this was in the best form possible for this board tonight.
Great.
So that's a yes.
I think I want to recognize too. I know that Dave and Norm, your board in particular, it's a lot of work to get these things accepted. I know that we have to deal with them from time to time with these subdivisions, and it is an intensive process. So thank you for kind of pulling this all together for our board in its final form. Makes it easier for us. Are there any remaining questions from the board? Again, entertain a motion to accept the layout, again, per planning board's recommendation for Bryce Lemon Estates Phase 1.
So moved with resolution to, I think it was item 18.
Okay, so the motion is to vote to accept a conditional upon the completion of item number 18, which is the pump station access. Do I have a second?
Whitman seconds.
Any further discussion?
Whitman second.
Thank you. Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Nichols,
Nichols, aye.
Whitman,
Whitman, aye.
Stillings,
Stillings, aye.
and Residency, aye. Motion carries unanimous. I'm sorry. Is Skip in yet, Peter?
Not yet.
All right. Can you just alert me when he gets here, because I don't want to overlook him by accident, and I can't really see everybody on the tiles. So
I will certainly do that.
thank you. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so again, if it's okay with the board, we could move around a little bit. I would like to first entertain public comment, going back to order after the hearing. Item number
Mitch, excuse me, if I may, do we need to vote to place it on the warrant?
We don't have to do that tonight.
Oh, okay. I apologize.
The
So-
one yesterday? No?
When we, excuse me, through you, Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
When we place all the other articles on the warrant, we'll do that as just one of the articles. So we
Sorry.
probably at the next select board's meeting, we'll go through a whole slew of articles to put on the warrant, and that is one of them. It's already on the warrant I'm developing, so.
Great, thank you very
So I
much.
think to answer your question, Tamika, and for the rest of the board, I think we're going to have a separate meeting to place articles on the warrant, and we can take care of that at that time. All right, if there are no further questions, is anyone here for public comment? If anyone is here for public comment, please use the hand raise feature on your Zoom app or desktop, and we will let you in. All right, I'll ask one more time if anyone is here for public comment. I do not see any hands with the exception of Mr. Stillings. Go ahead, sir.
Not for public comment, sorry.
Oh, okay. All right, so I don't see anyone here for public comment. If you do have something that you'd like to contribute and you can't figure out how to use the raise your hand feature, you can speak up at any time and we'll try to accommodate you. I know there's a lot of people here in the meeting. All right, so we have a couple things that we could take out of order. The board's amenable. Jeff, did you want to go ahead first before we do that?
Hello?
I was gonna ask the chair to accommodate. I see we have 4 department heads, the rec.
That's what I'm doing, Jeff.
Thank you, sir.
I do have somebody that is trying to chime in for public comment. Before we do that, I would ask that you please state your name and address and go ahead. I can't tell who you are on the screen. Dawn Poole. You have your hand up, Dawn.
She's muted.
Dawn, you are muted.
Yeah, we know. Hi,
Hello.
this is David Alex from 72 Woodside Ave. I'm just wondering what is being recommended.
Okay, so the public hearing is part of a process that the town takes as part of a step to accept the road as a public road, meaning that the town would take over the maintenance of the road for purposes of public safety, plowing, maintenance, general maintenance, things like that.
Okay, so you guys are recommending that it'll be a public road?
Yes, it is part of the process to make it into a public road.
Okay, so how many more hearings does it take to kind of get all the way to that? I'm just wondering.
There was this hearing. The planning board has a much more intensive process, and they really are the ones that deal with all of the order of conditions, any additional work that would have to be done with the developer. At the conclusion of that process, which I think Norm and the planning board have been working on for probably the better part of 6-7 months now, we get to tonight where they make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that the board holds a hearing, votes on behalf of the town to accept the road as laid out by the developer and the planning board. At that point, afterwards, the town can choose to put the article on the warrant, and then the town would vote at the town meeting whether or not to accept the road as a public road.
Okay. All right, so at that time, who would vote at that time? Would it be open to the public, or is that just more of a roll call again between
Yes,
people that are?
No, we have a town meeting form of government, so any member of the town can show up and participate in that voting process.
And I'm just wondering, like, what do you guys anticipate as far as timeline, as far as just ballpark when that would actually happen? Like, how long would it take? I know there's a lot of things that have to be done. I get that.
Town meeting is slated for, I believe, next month.
May 8th.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Jeff?
May 8th.
Yeah, May 8th. So you're looking at probably about 4 weeks.
Okay. And does anybody have any idea, like, are people leaning a certain way, or do we have no clue at this point? I mean, until we get to that point.
I mean, it's really a matter of the town voting on it. So it's not,
Okay.
I don't think we can provide the insight as to that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. I don't see anyone else. So Jeff, per your request, we'll move some items around.
I'm signing off. I just want to say thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clete. All right, I think we have a couple items to take out of order real quick.
Mr. Chair, I just want to let you know Skip is here with me now.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, so I believe, Seth, you're here for the COVID update. Is that the case?
Is it, Mr. Chairman? The number of department heads that are actually here, just in case the board has any questions as to the override issue later in the agenda.
All right. So in that case, I guess if they're here, we'll just take the agenda in order if they're not here for a particular item to help move them along. So I appreciate everyone's patience, and we'll try to keep everything else brief, or as brief as we can. So what I would like to do, if the board is amenable to it, is to take an item under old business first, because we have members from the Collins Center here that we would like to accommodate. There were some questions, if you recall, about the town charter. This would be item number 99 under old business for discussion, town charter. Does anyone have any objections to me taking that item out of order to accommodate Libby from Collins Center? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and broach that item now. Ron, do you want to kind of lead us into this?
I'd be happy to. So there's a number of questions about the process for developing a charter. We've invited Libby, Corbo, and Marilyn, hopefully I say this right, Contreras, to discuss this tonight. The contract, as you remember, the first meeting was off by a couple of thousand. That's been fixed to $20,000. But they were here specifically because some members had questions specifically about the process that would be established, you know, to actually form the town charter. And I know there was at least one question of, you know, what comes first, the bylaws or the charter, and somebody wanted a little bit of, had some question about how that would work. So Mr. Chairman, I think that outlines it. Maybe you want to let Marilyn or Libby just give you a brief overview of what the proposal is.
Sure. All right, Marilyn and or Libby, feel free to go ahead.
Well, this is Marilyn. The proposal is basically to work with the town to examine the current structure and propose features that would be appropriate for a charter.
Okay, but I believe there were some questions that were raised by members of the public, I think that they're here tonight, regarding the process itself and what would be considered appropriate, concerning the work we're currently doing in updating all of the town's bylaws. I think is that a fair assessment from the conversation we had?
Specifically, Mr. Chairman, Tim had a question that we were all kind of pondering a little bit, the difference between an appointed charter committee versus an elected charter committee and how that worked, and could you do both, and, or I'm sorry, could you do one or the other, and what were the differences between those two establishments of a charter committee? Maybe you can help us with that, Marilyn.
Okay. The Home Rule Amendment to the state constitution provides you two pathways to produce a charter. And in one, the first way is to elect a charter commission, to collect signatures, to consider the election of a charter commission, elect the charter commission. The charter commission has 18 months to produce a charter, has to hold a minimum of 2 public hearings, produces a preliminary report and a final report, and the charter is reviewed by the Attorney General's office for consistency with state law. And there are a couple of other reporting requirements, but basically that is a totally local process. The only time the document leaves Rutland is when it goes to the Attorney General's office. With the special act process, the Board of Selectmen with moderator or however you decide to do it, appoints a committee. They may give them a timeline. They produce a proposed charter, and it is brought to the town meeting as a proposed home rule petition to go to the state legislature. The state legislature goes through its legislative process with committee hearings, vote by the House, vote by the Senate, signed by the governor, and is returned to the town to be accepted by the voters. There's no particular timeline on that set in statute or in the Constitution. The town makes the decision on that. Is that helpful?
I believe it is. Now, as part of your scope of services that's been provided to, there are additional charges that the town is going to need to incur to move this process forward. Specifically, we have to fund a charter commission. We have to provide office space, clerical work to that commission.
No, that's if you elect a charter commission.
That's only if you elect the charter commission.
Yes, that's only if you elect a charter commission. Yes, so those are requirements in the statute, which is the Home Rule Procedures Act, which implements the provisions of the amendment.
Great. So if we appoint, we avoid those potential additional processes. Is that kind of what you're?
Yes, you would be able to like post the proposed charter on your website, and provide copies at the library for people, but you wouldn't have to mail a copy to every home.
Okay, I do see a hand up from Karen and Tim, and then Leah after Karen and Tim. Thank you.
Hi, through the chair. I guess I was going to ask a question to the Collins Group. What advantages, disadvantages? I mean, the elected has been laid out pretty much. It's specific after I've read the state law. So I'm curious, what advantage does the special act have? Is it just an expeditious way that doesn't have as much, I guess I'll use the word paperwork or legislative requirements? So that was my curiosity. What was the advantages of using the special act, and how much have you guys seen that in use for town charters in the last 5 years? Thanks.
I would say in the last 5 years, there's probably been 10 or 12 charters adopted this way. There's dozens of them in the state. There are other towns that have done this, and yes, the process, because it is not statutory, because certain procedures are not statutorily required, it can often be faster than the charter commission route. That's usually the reason that people want to use it. The other reason that you may have heard or not is that there is some concern that the people who are elected to the charter commission may be seeking to make changes that the town as a whole does not want, or the charter commission becomes divided, and that doesn't produce a charter that's acceptable to the town. This process has somewhat more control in that regard.
Tim, did that answer your question?
Yeah, sort of. I guess for now, the key component is I talked to the MMA, and they basically gave me the answer of what the Collins Group has said. There's two ways of doing it. I just wondered, am I the only one in town that's asking this question for something that's as major as a charter? I'm just curious about that.
And that's a good question. Leah, I see you had your hand up as well.
I think Tim and Marilyn kind of touched on this. My understanding, and maybe I'm totally off base, is that with the appointed committee, provides more kind of checkpoints throughout the process for town input, the potential for that. Whereas my understanding is the elected is obviously the charter commission is elected, and then there's less need for the town as a whole to have that input. I'm not 100% sure that. I was wondering if Marilyn could kind of speak to that.
Well, I think that because the elected charter commission requires a minimum of 2 public hearings, that you're guaranteed. The guarantee is there for public participation. When it's a special act, the town has to decide what the best methods of public participation would be. The fact that it goes to the town meeting is another public participation opportunity too.
That's a good point.
So could I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, through the chair, if I could weigh in. My name is Libby Corbo. I'm with the Collins Center. Just in my experience here, I think that one of the benefits that's seen with the appointed process is that the entire town comes together and essentially puts this forward and puts its stamp of approval on the charter. And that is something that is important to some towns to have, this type of community consensus, putting forward such an important document for the town. And that might be something that your town might want to consider when deciding which way to go, is really that the town meeting has to authorize this document, put its stamp of approval on it, versus the elected method where, although you do have public hearings, there's no real, other than the elected officials themselves, there's no real public vote on the document going forward. But correct me if I'm wrong on that, Marilyn.
Well, they have to vote on it. They have to vote on it when the question appears on the ballot.
Right. So other than the election, but at town meeting,
Right.
it wouldn't come into play.
Right.
Tim, I see you have your hand up again.
Yeah, Libby, I had a question, and this is more of just, it's specific to Rutland. And I know Leah and Lyndon had asked this question previously. We're in the middle of a massive bylaw upgrade, and it seems like, how would that work with you guys? Because I'm sure that in the other towns maybe that you've done the charters with, they were using the charter as the basic document because the bylaws maybe weren't as well defined as we're working towards for Rutland. So I'm trying to figure out if we're putting the cart before the horse, or have you guys seen strong bylaws turned into a charter?
You are putting the horse before the cart in some ways, but basically a lot of your bylaws are going to be regulatory, and charter is not really going to change the premise of those. Anything that relates to structure and organization might be changed as a result of what comes out of the charter.
Just on that note too, I would encourage anyone who's, it's not my decision, but it might be good to have someone who's involved in the bylaw review process to be also on any appointed committee for the charter, because there's definitely overlap there. We like to think of as charter kind of as a constitution for your town. It's a document that has, all the governing authority in one spot, and bylaws definitely have a role in there, but the charter, of course, would take precedence. So the two can work harmoniously together. It's not one or the other, and there will be overlap. So it is perhaps a good idea to have someone, that work is always still valuable in any part of the charter review. Anything that you're doing with the bylaws would definitely be valuable to any charter discussions that occur.
We had just allocated money at special for bylaw review, attorney bylaw review. And that process is currently underway and maybe about 25% complete. Peter, you correct me if my numbers are off. Does it make sense then, given we're already spending money on the bylaw composition, to wait until that process is complete to engage in the charter, to eliminate some of that duplicative work where there could be overlap concerning time constraints and time commitments from both the Collins Center, our staff, and the folks that are working on the bylaw already?
Are you, I don't want to speak out of turn. Is this a grant funded project? Is this a large amount of this is being funded through the grant, or is the town funding this project?
Ron,
Chair, if I may.
I think correct me if I'm wrong, the bylaw committee, the legal on that is actually from town funds. 'Cause I remember at the finance committee, we actually had to get the approval for that.
No, the charter.
Oh, the charter thing is through I think we agreed that was through a article at town meeting.
Right, simple town meeting appropriation.
Town meeting appropriation.
Now, just to be clear, Mr. Chairman, because I had a lot of conversation with Michael Ward at the Collins Center about this specific issue, because I had asked him early on if we, should do the charter before the bylaw. He says that in most cases, the charter comes first, but some towns have done it where the bylaws are first. He didn't have a problem with it being done either way. I've had a lot of conversation with Peter Crane, the chairman of the bylaw committee. And obviously, there is going to be a member on the bylaw committee that's going to serve, or is going to be asking to serve on the charter committee. So we have that working group together to do it. I think that the way Peter looks at it, and I'll let Peter speak to himself, but Peter thinks that it's good to have a strong foundation of bylaws in which that the Charter Commission can use to develop the charter. And we believe that mostly everything will be consistent, but there could be differences. There's no question there could be some differences. But that was, out of the conversation I had with Peter. So it can be done both ways. Charter is usually put first, but not on all occasions.
Okay.
And you're not. I'm jumping ahead here, but if your form of government stays basically the same, there will be a few bylaws that may need to be changed if the charter is adopted, but a lot of them will be fine.
Okay, Lyndon and then Tim.
Yeah, we are looking at some major changes, and my concern that I have voiced previously is that we're paying council to review these bylaws that may be recommended that they change, and I have a problem with spending town funds to review bylaws that we may possibly be changing. It does not make any sense to me whatsoever to be sending these to council.
Tim, go ahead.
Through the chair, this is a question I had, and maybe this is for the Collins group or just a general question. I'm trying to figure out if we're doing a great job, and Peter's doing a great job at updating and enhancing these bylaws, and then we have a charter. Which is the overriding controller in the town of Rutland if we've got strong bylaws and a charter? So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Which one is
the charter? In the hierarchy of law, the charter. If there's any difference between the charter and the bylaws, the charter governs.
Think of this, Tim. Think of the charter as the town constitution, and the laws are just laws. The bylaws as regular laws. That's the same thing. Constitution is your prevailing document.
Okay, good. I'm trying to see, and again, Peter's done a great job. We're trying to get these bylaws refined, and then we're going to Lyndon's point, we're going to jump right into a charter when we don't have our bylaws really refined. So it seems like we're dividing our forces, and as everybody knows in town, it's tough to get people on commissions because we've got so many. So that's what I'm worried about now, is getting a lot of good people, because we've got a master plan going on right now. We got a town center going on. We've got a lot of committees with a lot of people, so we're going to ask for another one. I don't think it's right now, in my opinion, a good time to start this process. But that's my opinion.
Understood. And we certainly have not spent, in my opinion, enough time discussing this as a board in terms of the process we would like to see. Even when this was adopted as a put on the warrant and accepted, this was not really fleshed out or idealized by the board prior to that. So,
Mr. Chair, may I add a little of my own color to this?
Of course, Mr. Crane.
Thank you so much. Ms. Corbo, how do you do? My name is Peter Crane. As I've been mentioned once or twice as the chair of, among other things, the bylaw committee in town. There are actually several other members of the committee here. Norm Anderson is on it. Anita Carlson. Try again. Anita Carlson is on it. Our bylaws started in 1941, and they haven't been significantly updated, some of them, since then. So the point of the bylaw committee initially was to update those bylaws and bring them up to date with current case law and current Massachusetts, basically enabling statutes. Along the way, we knew that the charter would come along. And so what we're doing from a town government, for lack of a better word, documentary point of view, is to describe the government as it exists today, with the hope that it would be very useful to the charter when that gets going. And as I said at the last select board meeting, it is sort of my vision that when the charter is adopted, assuming the bylaws are accepted before then, that we would, at time of charter approval, repeal the first 4 chapters of bylaws, which is all about the structure of government. so that there would in fact be no conflict at the end when we're done. So we're trying to bring a lot up to date. We're trying to add a lot of benefit, we think, to the bylaws, and we absolutely positively do not want to conflict with whatever work the charter committee will do, or commission, and furthermore for that body to be able to use the bylaws as we're done with that.
Thank you, Peter. Lyndon.
I just want to restate that, we're spending money to have council review these bylaws. So we're wasting town funds if these bylaws are going to be obsolete after we go through the charter. So that is my concern.
Lyndon, I'm sorry, may I respond?
Peter, go ahead.
I don't believe that it is wasteful in any event. One of two things will happen. The bylaws will be directly applicable to the charter, in which case nothing's been spent. Actually, I said two things. Let's go with three things. Minor mods will be required because there will be some changes that the bylaw committee did not anticipate. And so there will be an incremental legal review cost. And the other option I can think of is wholesale changes made to the government, moving, as I've heard described more than once, as this is the opportunity to move to a town manager town form of government. I don't know what's going to happen in the charter. And in that case, some money of bylaw review will not have been useful because we won't have a town administrator. So his bylaw review would have been useful only for the interval of time until it is repealed. I still don't think that's a waste given the condition of our current bylaws.
I respectfully disagree.
Okay.
All right, is there anyone else on the board that has any questions or concerns before taking Tim? Leah, go ahead, and then Tim.
Thank you. What's the typical time frame if we were to go the appointed route? What's the typical timeline in the Collins experience as far as kind of from the forming of the appointed committee all the way through till obviously it needs to come before town meeting. So we're kind of hinged on that end, but is it generally 18 months, 1 year, 18 months, 2 years?
Usually closer to, I'm talking average here, I would say a year.
Tim, go ahead.
Thanks, Mitch. Through the chair, I heard something I wasn't sure I'm excited about. Is the charter being used to change from town administrator to town manager? Was that a correct understanding of mine? Because I'm confused. I didn't think we're there yet. Somebody help me out.
It's my understanding that Peter was using that as an example of an instance where a bylaw that he worked on and paid for a legal review would result in a net loss financially of the town.
But we're still, Mitch, we're still going to run our government as town administration through the select board, correct?
I don't know. We won't know until we get into the process what the charter committee would recommend. Who knows what's going to come out of that process. But as of right now, this is how we're operating. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, we have a couple different options. I want to thank folks from the Collins Center for coming in. The town can either enter into an agreement with the Collins Center to begin to establish a town charter. We can have further discussion about it. We can move this. To be honest, my opinion is we haven't really discussed it enough as a board. And I do have some questions about the nature of the work between what Peter is doing versus what we will be paying the Collins Center for. Because, Peter, I'd like to kind of run you into the ground for every ounce of energy you want to give, because I know that we're not paying you a rich stipend for the work you're doing. But that being said, I see a little bit of overlap in some of the work activities. So I'm just a little unclear as to what the most appropriate way to move forward with this is. Mr. Stillings.
I agree with the chair. I don't think this is in any position to to call for a vote at this point, because the reality is, if we were to change the dynamics of how this town is operating under a TA or a town manager in there, you need the charter first. So something that significant should come, at the very least, some sort of a hearing, public hearing, where the public can weigh in on how they would like to see the town expand, as the population goes up. I mean, a town manager is going to be very parallel to how Holden's government is. The old school, where we have the TA right now, and the Board of Selectmen is more of the country charm that we kind of enjoy. So something like that, I would like to defer a little bit, or kick the can down the road, and give the public time to weigh in a little bit, and perhaps a hearing is necessary.
Yeah, I see you had your hand up, and then Libby.
If Libby wants to, if she is responding to Jeff, then that's fine to have her go.
I just wanted to make clear, in case there's any confusion, is that a charter isn't necessarily tied into a town manager form of government, a town administrative form of government. It's really what the town wants it to be, and it's just your opportunity to form a document that is the town's governing document. Of course, I'll defer to Marilyn, my colleague at the Collins Center as well, if she wants to jump in, but I don't want there to be any misinformation that a charter is associated with one or the other form of government.
No, thank you for clarifying. And again, I think that was something Peter was using as an example. So I want to re-emphasize that as well, that it's really going to depend on what the commission and the public wants to see out of its government as part of that process. We haven't talked about what we want to do either with a commission. We haven't talked about appointments. We haven't talked about the nature of how that's going to work. It just, again, appears to me that we're not far enough down the line to where we can make the best decision possible for the town. Leah, you had your hand up as well. Did you?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Town meeting did appropriate this money also. This was actually before the appropriation for the bylaw work. And I was one that was pushing for the town charter work because their bylaws were so obsolete and everything. So, maybe shame on me for not realizing how much the bylaw committee was going to do at the town government side of things. I thought their primary focus was to codify everything and bring everything to current, everything that was existing to current, and not focus as much maybe on kind of the strengthening of the town form of government bylaws. And so my thought was, when we recommended the appropriation for the bylaw review, was that they would be focusing more on the kind of existing and codifying, bringing up to current existing bylaws, and not a whole lot of the new bylaw work. That would be done with the charter commission or committee. I'm sorry, the committee. So that was my understanding. So, the money for both have been set aside through town meeting. So that's just there. You know what I mean? I'm fine if we want to have additional discussion. I'm not pushing this issue tonight. But I think that we need to be mindful that the money for both has already been appropriated. Understood.
And thank you, Leah. I think I agree with you. And my concern is that if we're going to spend $20,000, I want to make sure that we're doing it the right way and that we've had those discussions. And I just think that when that was appropriated prior to that, the board really hadn't had much of a discussion at all about what they wanted to see out of the process, and what they wanted to see out of the commission, or, this notion between elected and appointed just came up 2 weeks ago. And there were some questions that we weren't really prepared to answer. So I understand the appropriation. I'd rather take my time and get it right, is my opinion, versus rushing into something. And so I certainly appreciate that. Does anybody have any further questions about this? And if not, there's no motion needed, but I'll entertain a motion if a board member so chooses.
I just wanted to thank the Collins for coming on, for Libby and Marilyn for coming on tonight and answering our questions, and having their patience with us as we kind of work through this, probably a little bit more slowly than they would like. But I agree with you, Mitch, that it's important that we do it properly. And so, having the feedback, we didn't have feedback from anyone in the public previously. So having this feedback now is important, but the timing just is of making things a little bit more delayed.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Olivia, I see your hand up.
Just, a final comment, and thank you very much for having us here tonight. When you think about the charter process, it's really the town's opportunity to examine the operation of its government and say, are we operating the way we want to? And what changes would we make to make it more forward thinking or more efficient? Or it really opens up a realm of possibilities for the town to change its operational structure. So that's really one of the benefits of the town charter process that you might not see in the bylaw review process, and how you want to take it in terms of whether you want to do bylaws first or after or concurrent or whatnot. There is some overlap, but there is definitely a distinct inquiry that you'll make during the charter process that you won't see during your bylaw review. But thank you very much for having us here today, and we're here to answer any questions about the process or the substance of the charter process that you have.
And if you think that would be helpful, you can send us questions, or we can participate in another meeting if that would be helpful in terms of clarifying anything about the process and about what we do.
Thank you. Ron, I see your hand up. You're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm getting a little confused in the conversation here, right? So right now we have a charter bylaw committee that is working on bylaws and going for legal counsel to review that. There seems to be a concern about doing that first, and that there might be, in some respects, the charter should go first before the bylaw committee. Are we today telling the bylaw committee to stop doing legal review of the bylaws until we make a decision as to what we want to do with the charter? I guess I'm not sure. My feeling, and just to give you my opinion for what it's worth here, is that the charter in my mind gives you the overall kind of coverall of everything, and I make a suggestion perhaps Peter wouldn't like, but I think Lyndon's concern of spending money on bylaws may be an accurate one. That maybe it makes more sense to do the charter, let the bylaw committee continue working, but not pay the legal fees to review the bylaw until such time as we're ready to coordinate between a charter and a bylaw committee. But I guess I'm kind of baffled at where we go from here, given the comments, or if we're not going to move forward on agreeing to do a charter with the Collins Center, are we telling Peter to stop in terms of legal review, or where do we? What's our plan in moving forward, I guess?
How much of that money have we spent in legal review, and what is left to do? I guess would be my question to Peter.
We have spent $0. There was a legal review using town funds a while ago to do a couple of specific bylaws. Everything since then has been on hold until we got the appropriation, which we did. So we have spent $0 of those dollars on legal review so far. We, based on the select board review of chapters 1 and 2 last several weeks ago now, we're ready to throw a couple chapters towards KP for legal review. I was getting ready to set up the next meeting, or to coordinate the next meeting between the select board and the bylaw committee to review the next chapter. But if we're not going to do legal review, it doesn't make sense to do that at all either. So the board, we serve at the pleasure of the select board. What would you like us to do?
Lyndon, I see your hand up.
I have a concern with sending any of those bylaws out yet. Back in October, before our special town meeting, when we met with the finance committee and the board of selectmen, Peter made a commitment that all the boards would have an opportunity to review those bylaws that would affect them prior to any of them being sent to the attorney. I just want to make sure that the finance committee had an opportunity, because they're affected greatly from those bylaws. So I want to make sure that they reviewed those bylaws prior to them being sent to the attorney.
Every committee affected by the bylaws has been sent a copy and asked for them to be reviewed at a meeting. Some have not.
So the finance committee was sent a copy for review.
Yes.
And have you received a response from them? Because they are
I have
affected.
not. I have received no response whatsoever.
Okay, so I just would like to make the point that I would like to see a response from the Finance Committee prior to those being sent to the attorney.
Thank you. All right, Karen and Tim, I see you have your hand up.
I guess I would like to ask Peter where he sent the ones to the Finance Committee, because I, as Vice Chair, have not seen them.
If you give me a couple minutes, I can search through my sent items to find the date, time, and the recipient of the email. I will guarantee you Ian was on it because he's the chair, but I didn't think he was the only member, but I could be wrong about that.
Thank you, because I did not see it.
Okay, so I guess we can just, first item of business, make sure that the boards are aware and see those bylaws. I definitely hear that concern from Select Board Member Nichols. Ron, I really don't know at this point. You know, we started down the bylaw path, and the board thought prior to special town meeting this was a good idea to get some of those things updated because they are sorely needed. That process is moving pretty quickly. The charter process, you know, it looks like it could take a little bit more time to flesh out the details of that. So I'm hesitant to have an opinion to halt the work that Peter and his subcommittee have been doing while we sort things out on the other end. That's just, I'm a little bit hesitant to say that.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, hesitant to stop the bylaw committee from continuing to work?
Correct.
Some hesitation on not allowing or not wanting the bylaw committee to spend legal funds as of yet until we know what we're doing a charter. So I guess the question for Peter, through Peter, is should Peter continue, you know, moving forward with sections of bylaw and getting legal review or not? I mean, I guess that's the question that I'm sure Peter would like to know.
I can't speak for the rest of the board, and I'll let Jeff go in a second. Just my opinion is, you know, Peter's put a lot of time and effort into this, and he's doing it at minimal to no cost to the town, which is rare. And the quality of work that I've observed that he's put in has been exemplary. So again, I'm hesitant. It would feel to me like, given this is a passion of his, and given the level of communication that at least the boards that I'm involved in have seen with that process, it would feel punitive to tell him and his committee to stop with that work. And it is moving along quicker. I mean, even if we were to move ahead with the charter, I really think that that's a little bit, that process can be a little bit further out than some of the work that Peter's doing. And that work that Peter's doing helps us now. It helps us understand the way our government functions. It helps us understand the bylaws we have, and it's modernizing the way that we're doing things. That's my opinion. Mr. Stillings, I saw that you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I could wholeheartedly concur. You got to let Peter proceed and send a positive message of support. And then the discussion is about the charter. But just continue to march in the bylaw as they have been.
Norm and then Leah.
Yeah, I guess first I'll start with a question, or a sort of question. This $20,000 that was appropriated for the Collins Center, that's not a final bill, is it? That's just a down payment?
No, that's a final bill. That's the full amount for them to help us establish a charter. So it's a full payment.
Okay. Then, well, my next comment is probably a little bit less significant, but at least for the best of my understanding of a charter versus bylaws, particularly if well written, a significant portion of our bylaws would simply be rolled into the charter. To be taken out of bylaw, put into the charter. If you have some up-to-date and well-written bylaws, you know, for example, we have a Board of Selectmen bylaw, we have a town administrator bylaw, we have a finance committee bylaw, and those could simply be wrapped in, which it would seem would make the charter process much easier and go much more smoothly. So that's my thoughts, and therefore, to my way of thinking, the legal review by the bylaw committee is well worth it.
Thank you, Norm. Leah, go ahead.
I guess one of my and this is a discussion point I think for the board, maybe a little bit, is what is the harm of agreeing to sign into an agreement with the Collins Center and establishing a charter committee that then can work ideally with at least one bylaw committee member on that can work kind of cohesively together, and maybe those bylaws get held back from legal review or whatever as the charter committee works forward and can kind of work in sync together.
I think that's the conversation we're having, but I think that when we had talked about that earlier, I just don't think we're in a place yet where we're ready to make that commitment. We haven't talked about committee structure, really any of that. And the cost of the town is $20,000. And again, we have a lot of this work that's currently undergone. I think we need a better understanding and a better conversation by the board to be able to move forward on that.
I mean, it's $20,000 that's already been appropriated. I'm not sure how much we appropriated for the legal review. I know it was not the full amount. And so
$5,000?
4 or 5 was in my head, but I don't remember, to be honest. So I guess my question is, would it be worthwhile, since those select board, town administrator, FinCom bylaws are underway, to establishing the charter committee to work with those and not necessarily push those to legal review, still have a complete package pending feedback from the boards and commissions that could then work with the charter and determine, those two groups together could determine what makes sense to send those to legal review, or that gets lumped into the charter committee itself.
Okay, anybody else on board? All right. See no further discussion. Again, I'll entertain a motion. We don't need a motion. It sounds like the consensus is to hold off on moving forward with the charter process itself, and to continue with the work that Peter is doing, be it that he communicates effectively to the boards and commissions of the bylaws that he is proposing updating to. Is that the consensus of the board that I'm seeing? Mr. Nichols?
I still have an objection to the fact that maybe it's not the Finance Committee's bylaw, but they are greatly affected by those bylaws. And we made a commitment, and there was much concern back in October, like people were suspicious. And we reassured them that they would have the opportunity to review that before anything was done that would affect their authority, which I think those greatly affect their authority. So I object to anything being done prior to the Finance Committee reviewing those and giving an opinion. And I'm not sure, because I wasn't in the meeting, but did the committee actually vote to have them sent to the attorney?
No, I don't believe that there was the meeting we had. Is that what you were referring to, Lyndon?
I guess the meeting that I didn't attend. Did you vote to have them sent to be reviewed by the?
There were no votes taken during that meeting. It was. Okay. It's my understanding there were no votes. I don't recall any votes. It was merely for review.
Okay, so if we review the meeting back in October, we made a commitment that the Finance Committee would have that opportunity. So I object to anything being done prior to that.
Understood.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You may.
The email that I sent to Ian was December 20. I'm forwarding it to Karen right now.
So December 20th, you didn't hear back and you just didn't bother sending it to anybody else?
I can't take the time to chase down
Karen, if you could just direct the questions through the chair, please. We usually don't want conversation with two individuals. I believe in order of chain of command, that email should have gone to the chair, and it sounds like that was appropriately done. Should there have been additional follow-up, that might have been better for communication. So I think that that's something that we can probably work out between those two boards without any sort of animosity. So if it's amenable, I would just suggest, Mr. Crane, that you provide the FinCom with another opportunity to review that prior to any further work or conversations about that bylaw being done. Is that fair?
That is fine with me. As I said, Now the email's in her inbox or on its way to her inbox.
Okay, Mr. Ross and then Mr. Nichols.
Yes, through the chair, we would love to have the opportunity to review. I have seen it somehow, the preliminary draft, and we'd like to talk about it. And we should set up a meeting with Mr. Crane and his committee to do that. That's just through the chair. We have not formally reached back to him at all, but thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Darren. Lyndon.
Yeah, I just want to also mention that in reviewing that meeting, there were comments made that the finance committee would not be happy with that bylaw. So it was obvious that it was important that they review that. So I really strongly object to the way it was handled.
Okay, thank you. Again, I don't think there was any malicious intent here. I think there was perhaps just what we have here is a failure to communicate, a cool hand Luke type moment. And I think this can be easily resolved. So I appreciate everyone contributing. All right, so I guess if there's no motion, we'll move on the agenda. Thank you again to the Collins Center for coming in. We certainly appreciate it. And we will go back.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go back into order here and try to get through some of this stuff as fast as we can. Appreciate everyone's patience. All right, going back into order on the agenda, we have a town administrator update, item number 7. Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be quick. I sent out a town administrator's announcement on a lot of information that was requested by Selectman Nichols. I'm going to go through it very quickly, not so much for the board's knowledge because they have the report, but for the public's knowledge. Just to let you know, right now we have been approved and moving forward with 3,420 doses of the vaccine each week, resulting in us moving to a 5-day week operation. So they're managing part-time staff, part-time hired staff, town employees, and over 200 volunteers. It's great news that how many people are being involved in this process. I gave you some statistics, and I'm going to give the 3/25/2021, so March 25th. I'm just going quickly through from 0 to 19 years of age, 31 vaccinations from 20 to 29, 119 from 30 to 49, 413 from 50 to 64, 383 from 65 to 74, 233, 75 plus 346, for a total as of 3/25 of 1,525 of vaccinations. So they're working really hard over there. I've had an opportunity now to go over there twice and thank all the volunteers. At the end of the coming week, I've been giving out 23,000 doses. Since the beginning of January, they've completed 71 clinics. As far as costs go, indirect costs, these costs are handled as followed. Town staff, salary staff, there is no reimbursement. There is no reimbursement under FEMA guidelines. So if the police chief was over there, you wouldn't get reimbursed for it. Hourly staff wages are covered for any outside their normal schedules work week, straight time, and overtime is eligible for reimbursement. So all of that's reimbursed through FEMA. Hired staff, all wages are completely covered by FEMA. All supplies used are covered by either CARES or FEMA. Operation costs, FEMA will not allow rental of any owned town building. Utility costs and necessary modifications to make the clinic work is covered. However, they were allowed to replace broken furniture at the library as there was not heat downstairs. I'm sorry, not furniture, furnace at the library since there was no heat downstairs. So that was $9,000 of money that was able to use to provide heat for the library. So that was very, very good news. Soul Systems, I think I've told the board this, but I wanted to be clear. An actual withdrawal of the lease has been presented to the RDIC. Neither the Heights property or the Wheeler Road property for Solar System is going to move forward. And that RDIC, if they haven't yet, they will shortly be considering the withdrawal of the actual lease for the property. Rutland Prison Camp, just to let everyone know, I sent you a letter. Our state senator and state rep have been involved in this particular issue. They read a letter to the State Department of Conservation discussing that wall and it should have come down or shouldn't have come down. And the state senator and state rep is advised that they would like to know more before that decision is finally made by DCR. I personally have not got a lot of people in town that have reached out to me, but I do know that there are a few people very, very interested in this particular issue. And I talked to the Bear town administrator. For some reason, the Board of Selectmen of Bear are very concerned about this issue as well.
Barry.
Where?
Barry.
Barry.
BARRE. Updating on budget progress. The Finance Committee is working hard. We're finalized going through all the town budgets for what the department heads want. Now it's the beginning of trying to figure out how we make cuts to balance the budget. And I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting discussion about that in a later agenda item.
Ron, if we can just back up to the prison camp issue.
Yep.
I know there's been a lot of comments I've seen online. Jeff, you're a member of the Historical Commission. It's something that you've been involved with for quite some time now. Do you feel right now as a town administrator, if the board wanted to be more involved, we could either write a communication to DCR or reach out to them to be more proactive? What is your opinion on that as a town administrator?
Is my opinion on it? Well, listen, the Board of Selectmen, I don't know how each individual member feels about this particular wall. I sent you out the conversation, the email DCR had made back to Senator Goby about the wall and why they feel that the wall should be taken down. There's nothing, if the Board of Selectmen feel they want to comment on this issue and write a letter to the State Department of Conservation, DCR, I think that's totally appropriate. It's state property, so at the end of the day, I think it's up to the state to make their decision, but I'm sure they would love to hear what different citizens think and what the Board of Selectmen thinks. So I think that's really the decision of you guys if you want to write a letter. I'd be happy to help write that letter if you guys feel that that's appropriate.
Mr. Stillings.
Thank you, Chair. Since it's on the agenda, I would like to talk about it. We're not necessarily talking about a wall. We're talking about 3 or 4 of the 4 remaining historical structures that have been there for 118 years since 1903. It's the remnants of a jail cell of the county prison farm. There is the wall that you say. There's also a root cellar that they want to cordon off so that the public couldn't enjoy it. There is quite a bit of public dismay over the issue. And just real briefly, I had reached out to Mr. Moriarty, who's online, and I want to thank him publicly for the research that he did. I asked for calls for service, calls for emergencies at the prison camps. And just as an anecdote, also asked for calls for service at the schools, Memorial Field, Marshfield, and Devereux. So for example, in the last 2 years, there have been 0 calls for service at the prison camps. There have been nearly 100 calls for service at Devereux, 2 for Marshfield, 2 for Memorial Field, 8 for Glenwood, 4 at Naquag, and 4 at Central Tree. So it's clearly more dangerous to attend public school in Rutland than the Rutland prison camps. That being said, I would welcome discussion amongst the board members. My personal position, and when I did speak, it was as a personal individual, not representing either board, because the matter is upcoming before the Historical Commission. We had asked to table it so that we could absorb this information. The information was dropped on us at the last meeting in March where DCR told us of their proposal. So I had asked to table it so that we could absorb the information, get the data, because what they cited was graffiti, including some hateful graffiti and safety concerns in there. So now I have the raw data of the safety concerns, which is unfounded. The graffiti themselves can be argued in there, but for a historical perspective, this is the prison camps. This is where people go. You don't tear something down because there's graffiti on there. If that's the case, would be bridgeless or trainless or busless, and would certainly have no subways. So I would welcome, in fact, I would welcome our board's consensus in there that no action should be taken because they're looking to tear this down in summer of this year. I would love to see a letter of consensus of our board to the state, DCR, copy to our elected representatives saying that we are vehemently against, we're against destroying the ruins without some sort of a process. And at the very least, we would look for a stay, some sort of a stay, a pause, so that this could be looked into and present the raw data in here. So I personally vehemently opposed to destroying historical assets. What I consider a historical asset, and personally as a member of the Historical Commission also, I am going to recommend that we petition the Massachusetts Historical Commission to have that added as a historical asset in there. So that being said, I think that's enough to pause the DCR's intentions to destroy our historical assets. Yes, it's up to the state, but this is our town, and a majority of our town lies within Rutland. And there's a lot more history to it that we appreciate in there. So, and it also affects the town of Barry, Oakham, Hubbardston, and our neighbors. So I would welcome some support from the board in a letter. Thank you.
Mr. Nichols.
Yeah, I just want to say I 100% agree with Jeff. I mean, there's some, historic significance to our community. I don't think that this is the solution. I mean, if there's graffiti on boulders in state parks, are they going to start removing every boulder that somebody paints on? Obviously, the language is unacceptable, but there's got to be other resolutions. I don't think we should be destroying part of our community's history. And like I say, I 100% agree with Jeff regarding this issue.
Leah, and then I want to make a suggestion regarding a proposed process. Leah, go ahead.
Thank you. I agree with Jeff and Lyndon also. I think that the amount of traffic that it brings to people coming to town to visit them, if we're looking towards this kind of agritourism or day trip kind of business model kind of thing, to lose those entirely would be detrimental. I would love to see even the Historical Commission, maybe working with the State Historical Commission, put plaques up and out there to tell about the ruins that are there, because there's not currently anything there, and that would give some importance that might deter some of that vandalism, because there's a historical significance that's easily accessible right there, versus you go and see them and then you're trying to Google what it is or anything like that. So I think that could also help defer some of the bad that happens out there.
Yeah, I was honestly surprised to see that the Mass Historic Commission, who is overseeing DCR in this process, has deemed that the site is not historically or culturally relevant in any way. So I think what I would recommend as a process, and I agree with Jeff and Lyndon and Leah on this, would be, because I've seen so much public comment out in the ether, maybe hold a public hearing on it, take the feedback we receive there, and then instruct Ron to draft a letter of support and include that public feedback in that letter, if the board is amenable to that process. I think that would send a pretty powerful message to DCR, and it sounds like the project is not imminently moving forward. At least we can get something done in the next few weeks. Jeff, you have your hand up.
I think a public hearing would be outstanding and very transparent. What I did find particularly insulting at the Historic Commission presentation was that DCI's proposal and plan includes tearing down our historical assets and replacing it with a sign of what used to be there in there. And as far as the graffiti goes, one call to Sheriff Lou Evangelitis and the sheriff's work who could whitewash that. And I think a lot of it has to do with the culture that it's okay to spray art that area, but if you put signs up there saying, hey, no, wait a second, this is historical, please leave it as is, or even open up the wall, for example, for outside murals. I mean, I'm not opposed to that. What I'm opposed to is the hate graffiti, but that's what law enforcement is for. We enforce the laws. You could put cameras up there. You could put one of the multitude of rangers that I see driving around every day. You could put a sign there to do it, but it's more the cancel culture that we're constantly seeing, fighting, and tearing it down. And heaven forbid someone tags the DCR building in Boston, because that would have to come down. And but yes, I think some sort of a public hearing at our next board hearing would be very prudent. We could put it out there on the town site, let people opine, because all I'm seeing on the Facebook comments, it's outrage. People are furious that the state is overreaching once again. Remember this time last year before the COVID, They did the same thing with the gates. They're going to lock off the gates to exclude us from having recreation access. And it's not just hunters, it's the equestrians, it's the bicyclists, people who walk through there every day, even in the inclement weather, you'll see people there. Drive by the rest area, the parking area on 122 towards the Oakham line, and it's packed. People are in there riding and stuff like that. So it's the R in DCR stands for recreation, and they forget that. And we saw a hint of it last year when they simply said, without asking, we're going to lock the gates off and year round, and that's it. And, you know, without asking us in there. And if you remember, they had the Ware River Watershed Advisory Commission meeting at the library, and it was overflow capacity. They had to continue it to find a bigger venue because there was so many people in there outraged, and there was no supporters of the DCI's posture of closing off the prison camps in there. They had to continue it to Barry, and then COVID struck us. So that's still unfinished business, and I still sit here in the corner of this room right here. I have 2,000 signed petitions from citizens of this area vehemently opposed to blocking off our access in there. And this, it's a little bit more than just the wall coming down. It's more overreach of DCR. And once they eliminate all reasons to be there, then it's, you know, checkmate for them. Nobody else will be there. If there's no reason to go there anymore, then they can just block it off and just call it a day. But that's half of our town. Over 50% of our town is state-controlled land, and it is personal. So thank you. I would absolutely welcome and thank you for the opportunity to put a public hearing on our agenda for next meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, you thinking of a public hearing at a select board meeting, or what's
Yes.
your thought? I'm happy
We would integrate it into a select board meeting, and we'll just time it so that we don't have a fully packed agenda, be respectful of everyone's time. But I do want the opportunity for folks to be heard. And there have been a lot of comments publicly, and people have come up to all of us, I think, the ability to do that.
So just let us know when you think it's appropriate. We'll do what we can to help advertise it on the town website and Facebook pages and stuff like that. So whenever you have a date for that, we'll be happy to work that up.
Okay. Any further discussion from the board? If not, Ron, please continue.
Yep. My last item is an RFI. I put out a request for interest for marijuana cultivation. The reason I did this is because at least one company came to me to talk about their interest in doing marijuana cultivation. They have a site in mind and everything else. So in order to be fair to anybody, we had to put it out on the Goods and Services Bulletin and advertise it statewide for anybody that might want to do this. So you can expect that soon, once it closes, I think we gave about a month. Once it closes, will be the same evaluation team that did the retail establishment will be evaluating the proposals and making a decision if we would recommend to the Board of Selectmen a host agreement or not. So I just wanted you to know that that was going on, so you wouldn't be surprised by hearing about that process. Again, it's the benefit to it is it's more money for the town because you get 3% of the gross sales. I guess if you're looking at negative is if you like or don't like marijuana, that could be a negative. At least the current location is being talked about on Main Street. But again, that we don't know who's actually going to get it. But I just wanted you to be up to speed on what's going on with that. And that's all I have, unless there's any questions on that, Mr.
Any
Chairman.
questions from the board? If not, we'll move on and try to get through these next items pretty quick. Jeff, go ahead.
I just asked to clear our chiefs out of here. They've been waiting an hour and a half.
I think they were here for the part of the budget conversation.
My apologies.
Yep. And again, I think the chiefs are being patient. Certainly, you know, it's a virtue. So under old business, we've had the discussion about the town charter. Leah, did you want to give a quick update about the town center study, the master plan steering committee?
Yep, very quickly. Town center study discussion. There's a virtual discussion this Wednesday, April 7th at 6:30. It's via Zoom. I know the town has sent out some email blasts. It's on the town website. The links, it's on the calendar for the meeting link. There's a Google form if people have feedback questions, feedback that they would like to submit directly. If they can't attend the meeting or don't want to participate actively but would like to have questions addressed. I've hit some of the local businesses. I haven't hit all to just talk to them about it also and try to get some of their feedback. So that's the big thing for the town center study this Wednesday, April 7th at 6:30. And then for master plan, there's not a huge update. We're working on a survey, hoping to launch that the middle of this month. So once that's gone, we're encouraging people to go to the website, rutlandmasterplan.com, and you can subscribe to that or follow on social media. I think there's a Facebook and Instagram pages for that. And we'll do blasts again for that. And at our next meeting, I expect to have an update that the survey is live, and then we can push that also.
Oh, municipal government on Instagram. That's something. Thank you. Certainly appreciate both committees, the group's hard work. Next we have, this is something that Ron's been working on, a discussion regarding public property policy. We had talked about this before, and Ron had put together a proposed policy.
Mr. Chairman, you skipped 110.
Oh, I did skip 110. I apologize. We're going ahead of myself here. We have the charge for the Cable Advisory Committee, which came up last meeting. There were some suggestions for a couple of changes. And we have Peter and Paul, I believe, in attendance to talk about that.
Actually, Paul can't be here tonight, but I'm happy to cover this on my own.
Go ahead, Peter.
So we did update the change as we discussed at the last meeting, and I can't know how to work my computer. There we are. So the only change from last to this time was the explicit words, Assistant Town Administrator hired television station leadership and other staff for Rutland Community Television and directly supervise leadership and staff to enable those functions that RCTV performs. Other than that, it is identical. I believe this meets the intent of what Ron wanted, yes?
Correct.
Okay.
I support that.
Were there any additional changes that were received during the last 2 weeks? I know, Leah, you had mentioned you might want to make a couple of changes. Were your concerns addressed?
Yeah, I just hadn't had an adequate chance to look at it previously because I had received it right before the meeting. So I just kind of wanted to review it. One comment I have for the board discussion, and I think that I personally like it. I know previously there had been discussion as to whether or not it should be a concerted effort, even in the charge, to record elected boards meetings or televised elected board meetings. I think that that's a little bit of a slippery slope to specify which boards and commissions. So I like the recording and broadcasting local government meetings, but I guess that was just a discussion point if the board had any strong feelings.
Any further comments from the board? Seeing none, I don't see any. Peter, what is the language concerning the elected versus the town boards in it right now? I'm just trying to find it.
There isn't any language in that right now. Specifically, we record committees that we believe have sufficient public interest, rated based on that, which is why we record every single select board meeting, every conservation commission meeting, every planning board meeting that we can make it to, which has been everyone recently, everything that's on Zoom. And then we've added everything we can get our grubby little hands on from Zoom. So that's why CIPC and FinCom and ZBA, HPDD, we're either explicitly asked to do it, which we do, whenever we have resources, or we pick it up afterwards and broadcast it after the fact as opposed to live. We will continue to do every committee that we have resources to do the work for.
Yeah, and my only concern, and I understand Leah's comments, we have a lot of boards and committees we've been forming over the last several years, and some of them run temporarily, and some are set up for very specific purposes, and that's why kind of we have meeting minutes. I know that your staff, it always seems like your staff is being worked very hard. There's a lot of meetings. There's been a lot of meetings recently, especially in this COVID environment. So I can certainly appreciate all the work that you and that staff has done over there. It's been tremendous. Leah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I think to Peter's point, they've been trying to be mindful of what's going on in the meetings and everything also. And I think with town administrator and staff, I know, that AgCom may have some stuff coming up. It depends I don't know how the DLTA or whatever went with CMRPC and everything the other night, and RDIC, HPPD, anything that's kind of interesting topic or hot topic kind of that the town might want to know, in addition to kind of the regular meetings that cable does. But I think that that's working with the town administrator and staff, so I think that's covered.
Okay, great. Anybody have any further comments? If not, I'll just make a motion to go ahead and accept the charter as proposed. The charge is proposed.
Nichols, second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings.
Stillings, aye.
Whitman.
Whitman, aye. Thanks, Peter and Paul and Ron.
Nichols.
Nichols, aye.
Clark.
Aye.
And Recity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Okay, now we're on to naming public property policy. Now, Ron, you had put together a proposed policy for the board to look at.
Mr. Chairman, the board may remember that we had a kind of policy in my policy book that was done from Orleans on the Cape. And there was nothing wrong with the policy, it just was never really adopted in any real way. I had put out to a bunch of managers asking for their naming dedication of town property policies and got nothing. I spent a great deal of time talking to the secretary in the selectman's office in the town of Orleans. She told me that the bylaw has worked fantastic for them, that they're really, really happy with it. I converted the bylaw and put it all in Rutland as a Rutland policy. I actually think it's a very good policy for the town, and it'll make sure that these in the future go to town meeting and have a 2/3 vote. The Rutland Historical Commission will be involved in that process to make sure that only legitimate requests are moved forward and approved by town meeting. So I would say this to this policy and to the next one we're going to be talking about. I think that Peter should take a look at these and see if instead of a town policy, that later they should be in a bylaw format. But as of now, I think simply having them as a town policy would be good, and at least in the short term until we decide later to put it in bylaw form.
Jeff.
Thank you. And just clarification that this policy also relates to the naming of street names.
It does.
But it would be renaming streets, not laying out streets. Is that correct? I mean,
correct.
So you're not historical commission's not reviewing if there were a subdivision going in the names of the roads. It would be if you had a stretch of road to be named after Jeff Stillings Byway.
Second.
That's just an example, Jeff. But I mean, I think that's the intent of it. Is that correct, Ron?
Yeah, it's anything where you're naming a piece of town property. It could be a street, it could be a building, it could be whatever.
Mr. Chair, if I may, there's already a bylaw that talks about how to rename streets.
Okay, so this talks about in general naming of general town property. So if that is true, Peter, it's fine because that policy would supersede this because it's specific to the issue of streets.
And that's fine. Thank
cover
you.
all other things than streets.
Yeah, Jeff.
I think you haven't lowered my hand.
Oh, sorry.
Last one. Thank you.
All right. Any other further comments or questions from the board about the policy as presented? We can either let the board have more time to review it, or we can motion to accept it. Leah.
Sorry, Mitch. I had a question. I knew I had something. I was just looking at it. I know that there's some Mass State Law, MGL zoning bylaw changes, and in this, I think for the policy, it says that it would be a 2/3 majority vote at town meeting. Is that still needed based on the new MGL changes, or is that specific to the town, and is that what the town wants, the 2/3 majority?
I got the impression it was just zoning. I mean, I don't think that this would fall under the purview of a zoning bylaw. But of course, again, it gets to the point we just made it, Peter, that MGL would supersede if this were to be inadequate in that way. But that's a good question, Leah, for sure.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, I think that in terms of this purpose, it's just a town policy. If you so choose, you'd want to do this at town meeting by a majority vote. I believe that you could do that.
Jeff, is your hand raised by accident again, or?
No. This is on purpose.
All right, go ahead.
I just want to state that at the last historical meeting, the members did wish to send a letter to this board asking to be involved in future street naming proposals, specifically the proposal like at Rutland Heights. The Historical Commission would like to be heard on like the possibility if you're going to have so many roadways with the new proposed senior development in there, perhaps would be a time to include that into some historical segment of Rutland's history in there and have those names in there instead of just A Street or First Avenue. So the Historical Commission does want to be heard on the possibility of opining on future proposed roads also.
Yeah, I think we're veering off, not to use a bad road pun, but we're veering off the road here in terms of what this policy is just for public property. In that instance, Jeff, for a project like that, the subdivision builder would be laying out the proposed road plans, and there's a separate process already on the books for that. So we're not talking about naming those roadways. We'd be talking about, like, for example, what just occurred on Saturday with Ralph Anderson Square. And I think the intent of this process, not just for getting the Historical Commission involved, but getting the town and meeting involved, is to let the town know about it so that the turnout for something like that could be enhanced and that everybody in the town is supportive of it. And it's more just it's a good morale piece there. Leah, and then Tim and Karen.
Thank you. I just was wondering, since this references the Historical Commission, and that everything would need to go through, have they been able to see it at one of their meetings to talk about, to make sure that it sounds like, I mean, that they want to be involved, but have they actually seen this policy?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, the answer is no, this was not giving to them, but this policy includes them. It says the Rutland Historical Commission would be required to put its recommendation to town meeting. So under sub B, any proposed name or designation of any public building or land shall be submitted to the Rutland Historical Commission for its review and recommendation as to historic significance of the proposed name or designation. So in order for this to go forward, it has to go through the Historical Commission, and they have to give their recommendation to town meeting.
Okay, Karen and Tim.
I through the chair, Mitch, and this is for the board and for Jeff, the RDIC as of now up there, just to give you a heads up, most of in fact, as far as I know, all the roads within the over 55 community are going to be private. So that really takes it out of the town's requirement of being able to do anything. So it was just information I wanted to pass to the board.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I want to emphasize that this policy does not cover the naming or placement of public roadways, even if they were not private. This is something entirely different, and I think we keep veering onto that shoulder that we should not be veering onto. Jeff.
Just following up on Ron's comment that the matter is slated for the next agenda of Historical Commission on 4/13. It has not been publicly discussed.
I mean, in my opinion, I would entertain a motion tonight from this board. I think this falls under what the Historical Commission is charged with doing through MGL in their review of pertinent historical, artifacts in town, and that charge that's already given to them through state law. So I certainly, unless they come back and oppose it, which I suspect the Historical Commission won't, I'm not sure that's a necessary step in the process.
Through the chair, I'd like to make the motion to establish this public property policy.
I'll second. Stillings would second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion. Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings.
Stillings, aye.
Whitman.
Whitman, aye.
Nichols.
Nichols, aye.
Clark.
Aye.
And Residia, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Okay, new business. We're going to try to get through this stuff fast. We have a brief discussion about a $15,000 grant we've received for the cemetery. We should, as a board, motion to accept this. Ron, do you want to give us like a really 10-second overview?
I may have made a mistake here, I think, because if I'm correct, the Historical Society is a separate non-government agency. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
The Historical Society is private. Yeah.
Right. So in that respect, they're the ones that received the $15,000 donation. So I don't think, in fact, we do have to accept it. However, we do have to allow the motion should be changed to read, the Board of Selectmen vote to allow the Historical Society to restore the old burial ground, because I think the burial ground is in our control. So I don't think we have to accept the donation because it's private, but I do think we need to give them permission to go on the burial ground and do the work.
So I'll make the motion, so moved for the town administrator.
Nichols, second.
Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings,
Stillings, aye. Thank you to Carol Weiner.
Whitman,
Waitman, aye. Thanks for everyone.
Nichols,
Nichols, aye. Thank you.
Clark,
Aye.
and Resity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. We have an acceptance of gifts and grants policy that was also provided as a draft template. Basically, this is best practice, and it allows us to accept gifts publicly, establishes procedures for the Board of Selectmen to do that on behalf of the town, as well as the Board of Trustees for the library, the Community Center, the 4th of July Committee, the 300th Anniversary Committee, and then gifts of real estate, interest in real estate can only be accepted at town meeting. Again, it seems to be pretty best practice. Ron, I'm sure you pulled this from somewhere.
This was pulled from a number of other towns. I apologize, I'm looking for it in my folder. This was pulled for a number of towns. Frankly, I wanted you guys to have a chance to review this before you voted on it. So if you guys feel comfortable with voting for it, then great. If you want to take more time to look at it, that's fine by me too. It was trying to make it easy. One of the main things here I want to do is any small donation under $1,000 to the library or to the Bicentennial Committee, Bicentennial Committee, or the
Tricentennial.
July Committee. I'm sorry, 300th Anniversary Committee is the right way to say it. I'm sorry, not Bicentennial.
Tricentennial.
Library. All those donations under $1,000 would automatically be accepted. But if there was a larger donation in nature, it would have to come back to the Board of Selectmen. Also want to make clear that any land donation or anything that obligates us into the future would have to come back to the Board of Selectmen as well. And then all grants, the town boards and commissions and departments could apply for grants, but all grants generally would be approved by the Board of Selectmen.
Yep, I would just have one recommended change. So I would probably not want to vote to accept this tonight, and that is the 300th committee is a temporary committee. So we might just want to add more generalized language about any committees with access to fundraising or a separate account set up for fundraising. Because I would assume that over the years, we'll probably have some more of those temporary committees that are tasked with fundraising. We want to give them the ability to accept those gifts as well.
I said this is a draft from my perspective, so I have no preference that it gets done tonight. I really wanted to hear any comments from board members if they had questions or concerns to make this better. And if you have them, by all means, send them to me and I'll make changes to meet the needs of the board.
Any questions, comments? If not, again, we don't have to take action on this tonight. We can move on.
I'm fine to, if I may, Mitch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine to hold this. I wonder if, because we're talking about grants and everything, should we have department heads look at it also just to make sure that it suits their needs also? I mean, some grants, obviously, we want feedback from, I think, the select board, but some, I think, if it's for a very specific purpose that doesn't need matching or hold the town anything, do we need that reviews?
It doesn't, the policy doesn't prohibit the department heads from pursuing grants. It would just allow the Board of Selectmen to accept them, which also gives the board oversight as to any expenditures incurred by the town on the grant. Like if you recall, we accepted a SAFER grant through the fire department, and that had significance town match. And so it was good that the board was made aware of that. The policy just codifies that process, but this should not in any way impact, and Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, our department head's ability to pursue those grants in any way.
You're absolutely right, but I will also say the reason I put that the board approves all grants, so because I've seen a number of grants in my day where we got free money, but it did something that select members didn't want to do. So it's definitely better that you guys actually approve the acceptance of a grant. And I've had one or two where the board of commission put it in and the board of selectmen said, nah, that's all right. In this case, we don't want to have this long-term obligation that's set up by the acceptance of a grant.
Yeah.
So I think it's good the way it is. I wouldn't change that part of it. I think that those grants should go through the selectmen. Let you guys approve the actual acceptance. The grants have ties to them. Invariably, yeah, we'll give you this money, but you got to do this.
Right.
And you guys should know what those ties are before voting for them.
If we're fine to hold it, I'm fine. I can have my questions offline with Ron.
Yeah, and please send me any of your comments. This is an area where I really like your feedback to hear what you think. If you think we can, like the chair's comment about these temporary committees, that makes a lot of sense to me, so we can alter that. But please just send me a short email explaining the changes you want, and I can adapt it and bring it back at the next selectmen's meeting.
Great. Hearing nothing else, we'll move right along. We have a discussion about Board of Selectmen Committee meeting notification protocol. It came to my, and we'll keep this brief, it came to my attention that there was a member of the board that was unhappy with communication about a scheduled, outside of regularly scheduled board meeting for the purposes of reviewing the two sections of bylaw put together by Mr. Crane. Mr. Crane had sent out several email reminders directly to the board regarding both scheduling and confirmation. In reality, moving forward, I think we'll have Beth in Ron's office send out additional reminder to all board members and confirmation about meeting times, particularly for meetings that occur outside of their regularly scheduled time frame of every other Monday. So again, if there was a lack of communication there, I want to go ahead and apologize on that. I know that that most everybody felt comfortable with it, but I wanted to just make sure that we're all on the same page. So if that process is okay with everybody, if anyone wants to weigh in on it, I'll let them weigh in on it. But if it's okay with everyone, we can just make that standard procedure moving forward to make sure that that's more adequately addressed. Lyndon.
I just think that to make sure, I mean, how are you even going to know if you're going to have a quorum if you don't get responses from the board? So if there's any kind of a meeting like that, it should either be put on a calendar requesting response or some kind of verification to assure that there's going to be a quorum and that all members are notified.
Understood. We can certainly do that. Okay. Moving right along, we have a brief discussion. The Historical Commission has requested that we appoint a 7th member to be determined. I don't think we have any applicants at this point. What this would do is it would allow for an odd member of the commission. I believe MGL allows for between 5 and 7 members on historical commissions. So it appears that that fits. It would make voting a little bit easier, but it's something that we can consider. Jeff, you have your hand up.
Yes, I can concur that that was the intent of the commission, just to have an odd number. There is no interest, just in the rare event that there is a tie vote. So just to have an odd number.
Anybody, any comments from the board?
Do you need a motion for this, Mitch?
We do, but I just want to make sure. I have one question for Jeff as a member of the Historical Commission. I want to make sure that as this would be, I believe, increasing your quorum limit from 3 to 4, because for a 6-member board, I believe it's 3 for a quorum. Is this going to impact your ability to have a quorum, considering the attendance in meetings that you've had, or?
I don't think so. It shouldn't, and if it did, then maybe we, have the wrong commission member in there. They're expected to attend the meetings. So, I mean, I guess it could be 5 or 7, but just to have an odd number was the sole intention of that discussion.
Understood. Mr. Nichols.
Through the chair.
So I'm sorry. So
Lyndon and then Skip.
The quorum was 3. Is 3 at this point?
6 members. 6
Right,
voting
so it
members.
has to be a majority, so it have to be 4 anyway, is my understanding. So it would not change the quorum.
It wouldn't change the quorum, but it would change if there was a tie vote. That's the
All right, that's obviously the concern. Okay.
Rich, I don't know how to raise my hand, but could I make a comment?
Yep.
When it's 3 to 7 members that the Chapter 8D allow or Section 8D allows, but when Rutland accepted the provisions of that chapter and Section 8D in 73, it accepted it as a 6-member commission. So it would have to be voted on at town meeting to add a 7th. And I totally agree with the committee. 6 is a awkward even number. So, but it would need to be a warrant article to increase it.
Okay, so it appears that we can't vote on it tonight. So we know the process, and that's something we can work on. Leah.
I have a quick question for Anita, maybe. Does it have to be a set number, or can the town say a 3 to or a 5 to 7 member board? Does it have to be a set number? I'm just wondering if right now there might be interest, but in a few years, if we wanted to go back to 5.
I think they could do that. They could probably vote to have up to 7 members. And like right now, Council on Aging, we do that because they have had problems in the past. And the only thing that has to happen then is that the select board would have to vote every year for what the quorum requirements would be. So.
Okay, thank you. That can be a discussion once we get to that point for the warrant article. Thanks, Mitch. Thanks, Anita.
Skip.
Well, I was just wondering if anybody was looking for this seat. If not, we should cut it back to 5 people.
We can't, you have to go to town to change the size, so.
Yeah, I know that, but I mean, anybody looking for the seat?
Not at this time.
I don't think we posted it yet either, though. I mean, we haven't asked it.
We haven't advertised for it either, so. It sounds like there's a little bit of work to do on either end to tie this up. So I think we'll just move on, not spend any more time. It is getting late. Everyone has commitments. Okay, the big question here is the override. There have, as you all know, FinCom has been working through the budget that the TA has proposed, and is awaiting their feedback and working with them on their feedback. As of right now, the town is largely operating in a structural deficit. That if the school budget were to pass, one of the actions that we would have to discuss taking is to place a substantial override on the ballot for town election. So Ron, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, let me first say that, you know, I'll be the first one to say I'm not happy of what I'm presenting here tonight. I really didn't come to Rutland and think, oh, the first thing I want to do is to recommend an override. There's some realities here that the town's going to have to face. Is that over the years, the school department has been making requests that are very, very difficult for the town to finance because, as you know, we're limited with a Proposition 2.5 override and new growth. Doesn't allow us to spend over that amount of revenue that comes in, yet the school department requests have been significantly higher, and I think the town has been doing its best to try to meet the demands of the school system. And quite frankly, it's almost impossible given the kind of requests that they're making. So I think we all realize that last year we funded the town budget by using $200,000 of free cash in the regular town meeting, and then came back in a special town meeting and had to put another $205,000. That's the $405,000 structural deficit that the chairman was just talking about. Now, working with the finance committee, I believe we can do a lot and we can help. As I came in at the town administrator's budget presentation, you remember I proposed that in the budget we were putting forward that night, there was a deficit of about $1,095,000 into that. As of right now, through a ton of work by a lot of people, we've gotten that deficit down to approximately $680,000. And I think working with the finance committee, I think we can find another $260,000 in cuts. Won't be easy, but we can do it without destroying town side government. So if we were to redo another $260,000 in cuts, that would leave us $400,000, basically last year's deficit, to try to figure out. And to me, the issue here is, in my opinion, and I've looked at this budget a lot, there's no way we're going to find $400,000 in additional cuts to this town budget without making very serious and very damaging cuts to our town departments. Now you'll see on this call, there's a lot of town departments here, managers here. They all recognize that. And I've asked them to show me what a 5% cut would look like, and it looks horrible. And frankly, to try to get 400,000, 5% isn't even in the game plan. Some departments you might be looking at 25, 30, 35% cuts, which is ridiculous. This is not, in my opinion, this is not caused by the town side of government. It's simply, to me, the biggest increase here are really on the school side. But the way I look at this is we're all in this together. Like it or not, the school, Wachusett School District, Bay Path, and the town are all in the same boat when it comes to a budget. So I put forward language for an override for all of those groups to all try to work together to deal with this. I've had a number of selectmen and others say to me something that's dead accurate, and I want to be sure to make sure that you understand that I agree. Under the current structure of how Rutland operates, it's frustrating. And it's frustrating because whatever the school departments put has to go on the town warrant, and if it's approved, you know, the town side of government kind of gets killed by it, right? And they've said to me, well, if we pass this override, we're going to be in the same boat next year. And there is a lot of truth to that, that if next year, if the school department asks for $1 million increase, we're going to be facing difficult decisions again. But this year, I think we have the different problem. We still have to deal with the 405,000 structural deficit that was left in the last year's budget. And whatever we do, if we get the override passed this year, we get back to at least being even going into the next year's budget, we can deal with the school system. And I think we have to have some real serious conversation with the school committee and maybe other towns about changing the school agreement or doing something to stop this from being a annual occurrence. An override, putting forward $400,000 would protect valuable town services, protect our police department, protect our fire department, protect our planning department, protect all the different departments that are so critical to the people of this town. I'm asking for the override to be put up to essentially give the people a choice. If the people choose not to support the override, then that $400,000 of cuts are going to have to be made, and they're going to come forward on the town meeting agenda no matter what. The finance committee is going to have to present those cuts, but the public should have a decision to make. If you want to keep supporting the school system at the level that we're doing with these 6 and 7% increases, then you have two choices. You either pay for those increases, or you're really going to destroy the town side of government and expect cuts from our most vital departments. This $400,000 override, I give you guys a chart of the impact, just so people have an understanding of what it means to the community. In addition to their normal increases, depending upon the value of their home, and let's give it the average value, which is about $320,000 in Rutland, I'm told. The tax increase, just the override component, would be between $111 and $129 on top of your normal tax increase. Now, that's for that size home. Obviously, if you have a less expensive home or a more expensive home, you're going to get less of a tax bill or more of a tax bill. I don't live in Rutland, so my opinion as to should people vote for the override or not, I don't know matters as much as the average people here. I think the real question here, though, is if really comes down to a bottom line. If you want to support the school system at the level that you're doing, you got to vote for the increased money to do it. The answer is not to destroy the town side of government to keep funding the education system. I think, I'll make my last comment in this respect, is that I think there has to be meetings. So there's going to be a meeting of discussion. I think it's next Thursday night with the school committee about talking about restructuring that regional agreement. I think it's time that there has to be serious talk that we have to fix that school district agreement so we're not held over this barrel every year. So I would encourage selectmen, finance board members, and anybody who can to engage the school committee on saying, we're not going to go through this every year, because that's the process that has been happening for years here. So regretfully, I think the override is the only answer. I think we could still go to town meeting, and we could still, if people feel the school budget is too high, they can try to vote it down And if 2 towns vote it down, it'll go back to the school committee for further discussion. And I hope that that occurs, because I think there's got to be a message that we support education. We believe in the quality of education for the children, but you have to do it at a price that the citizens can afford and within some reasonable budget parameters. And frankly, at this time, I don't believe that that's occurring. So that's kind of my overview, Mr. Chairman. Department heads are all here. The town accountant is here to answer any questions. Particularly, they're here if you want to understand what the impact that, not putting the override would be. If we just started cutting our budgets, I think they would tell you that the impact will be extremely damaging on individual departments. So those are my comments, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Jeff.
Thank you. In response to the TA, the answer is to stand up to the schools, to hold your ground and stand up to the schools in there. And the reality is that we are 70 less students in the Rutland side of the Wachusett district. And that's a result of the ebb and flow of growth in there, and unfettered growth of years past has caught up. And now we have a dip of 70 students, and that's that much less reimbursement we're getting from the state because of the 70 student deficit in there. Yet the Wachusett School District is still asking for that same 6 or 7%, and hiring additional staff. And my whole class of NAQUAG, 1981, had 50 kids. That was it. 50 kids in my grade, and now we lost 70 this year, and that's a result of growth in there. So my answer is, absolutely, we got to support our services, but we need to hold our ground and stand up to the school people, and enough is enough.
I think I agree generally with the premise, but I don't agree with the cause, Jeff. What I'm disappointed in is the Wachusett, the district, it's at a 10-year low in enrollment. And if everything else is held equal, that district should be able to keep its costs within the same constraints and limits that municipal government has to. Now, 2.5 was passed in 80 and enacted in 82. And, it set limits on how much we can assess or raise off of assessed property values and how much we can increase, in what we're putting on property and real property tax. And the reason it was set at 2.5 is because 2.5 historically has outpaced inflation, so that you would always have a little bit of wiggle room to maintain responsible government. And we've done that. We've had really lean years in this community. Our staffing, we're doing a lot with less in our DPW, our police and fire departments. And if you look at the last 10 years, inflation's been below 2%. So the school budget coming in this year at 7.5% is a little bit unreasonable, considering not only are we at a 10-year low in terms of enrollment, the district lost 450 students this year because of COVID. They haven't had to enact a single layoff, not a single one in that district, despite lower enrollment. And the current school budget this year is proposing even more positions on top of the ones that weren't laid off, despite a lower enrollment. 7.5% at that original ask before it was lowered a little bit is just untenable. If we have to manage our government at 2.5%, the district should as well. And that's my opinion. Lyndon.
I don't even know where to start. I'm so outraged by the whole process. After 12 years on the finance committee of cutting every single department to try to meet schools' demands and being bullied by them year after year, for them to come in with a decreasing enrollment and give us these kind of numbers is a total insult. I just can't believe it. Look at what our departments did through this pandemic and all the work that they've done, and the school did not come through. And if you want to see what the school has to say, just take a look at the NAQUAG sign, the big blank sign in the center of our town, without a single word of encouragement, instruction, nothing, a big blank. They want millions of dollars, and they give us no support. And in their presentation, I did not hear much about supporting the children and what they've gone through this pandemic. It was all about numbers and paying salaries, and to have a superintendent who I believe, and I have to check my numbers, gets paid more than our governor, if not certainly close, and to write an apology for white privilege for what he has in his life, to take this away from our citizens is disgusting. We have people that do not have means. We have seniors that live on fixed income. We have a very active food bank because we have people that cannot afford these increases. I do not support overrides by any means. I do support giving people the opportunity, but I will never vote for one. But I also disagree that we want to do a partial override and cut our departments still, and then still increase our taxes and giving people a double whammy. It's all or nothing. And like I said, I'd give them the opportunity, but I will not vote for an override because there's no way that I think there's any justification for what they are asking for.
You're here, Lyndon.
I think to Jeff's point and to Lyndon's point, when you have our public safety officials that were literally putting their lives on the line in person every day in this pandemic, if this override fails, those are the departments that are going to be most impacted because that's our second largest budget line item. And to have to, after a fireman has spent his entire year working in person, not knowing what he was going to be walking into, to have to give that person a swift kick in the rear on the way out the door because we can't pass an override or we can't stand up to the schools, which to Jeff's point is probably the easiest route and the best solution to this. It just seems unethical and the wrong thing to do and the wrong message to send.
I just want to emphasize, Mitch, that it was every department. The library did everything to keep the people, the senior center, the department, everybody pitched in and they kept people going through this pandemic. The school did not do its job, and now they want more money for less. Even those decreasing numbers, I don't think those include like people that went to private school. Those are decreasing numbers, but I think if they would go to private schools, I think they're still in the enrollment. And I'd like to know those numbers as well. So like I said, this is an outrage.
Ron.
So a couple of comments. Let me to be really clear on a couple of things. One is, you know, over the years, one of the things I've been told from different people, even other town managers that represent the school district, is that we've been always trying to hold them to around 2.5% increase. And this year is just under 3% increase. But what you have to understand here is that they lost $1 million in state revenue. So a 3% increase in appropriations, you have to make up that $1 million of state revenue loss too, to pay for that, to pay the $1 million. So it's more of the burden falls on towns. So even a 3% increase, why are we voting for almost 3% increase in the school budget when the state is reducing the revenues to the school system by $1 million? Because as the chair said, the population of the school district is falling. There's less students. We got, for instance, we have 11 additional kids going to Bay Path, which is increasing the assessment of Bay Path by another $104,000. So I completely agree with the frustration by every selectman that the school should do this. And I completely support and will speak at town meeting to cut the school budget and vote no. The reality of this system, and this is frankly what I hate the most, the reality of the system is 2 towns have to vote no for the school system to be forced to even consider reducing the budget under this school system. Not putting the override on the ballot, not giving the people the choice. If this school budget is not turned down by 2, and if they don't cut the budget, there's no option for us but to very seriously cut town departments. And I don't think any of us want that. So, that's what I'm saying. I think you need to vote to put it on the ballot. And at the same time, if you really feel that strongly about the schools and what they're doing, you should stand up and speak against the school budget at the town meeting. You should talk to your friends and family, and employees should all do that. But at the same time, I'm more concerned about protecting townside government. And without that override, we may very well be in a position. And if the override goes down, we're going to be in a position of really cutting things like the senior center and the police department and the fire department that will be just devastating to our town departments. I think the reason I said to you and to Lyndon, to be clear, the amount deficit right now is 660. I truly believe, given we're going to be doing some refinancing of debt later on, we're going to be talking about a healthcare issue that might save us 40 to 50 grand. I believed in we have 120,000 of free cash. I really believe that we can get it down to 400. The cuts will hurt a little bit, but they're not going to be devastating cuts. What's really devastating is from 400 down is where I think the cuts are just unbelievable. So it's not like an all or nothing thing to me. I think, getting down to the 400 is just part of balancing this year's budget. It's last year's deficit that's really crushing us. And it's crushing us because the school district isn't giving us any breathing room in this year. So I strongly encourage you, let the people decide. If you want to vote no in the ballot, and that's fine when it comes time for a vote. But the reality is, if you vote no on the override and we don't knock down the school budget, then the reality is we're going to have to take all those cuts to the departments that none of us want. And I know I'm not one that wants to be laying off my employees, especially, I got these guys out there killing themselves to improve the quality of public safety people by doing vaccinations. I got police officers, firemen that are putting their lives on the line that, when a lot of us were hiding and sitting at home with masks, they were out doing their job. So I feel very strongly about protecting the town side of government. And that's why I'm asking for the override. I'm not asking for the override to protect the school system. Now, the reason I framed the question to include the school system, Bay Path, and town side of government is that love to see that all of those groups work together to support the override instead of having those groups fighting against each other against the override. So it is what it is. And, the choice lies with you guys, and I appreciate that. And whatever you do, I'll do. But I'm trying, this position I'm taking is to protect the town side of government.
What we've historically been poor at doing is probably communicating this effectively at town meeting. I think that is a responsibility of our board and finance committee and everybody involved to communicate what we're dealing with from a budgetary perspective. There have been prior boards that have stood up and supported the school budget that we in reality haven't been able to afford for several years now and have been paying gaps with free cash, which is a very poor municipal practice. And now we're at the end of the line and we can't do that anymore. In Holden, for example, that board of selectmen and that town administrator, as well as ours, has been very proactive in trying to communicate that to the public as much as they can and taking a unified stance that, look, nobody values education more than me. I have a daughter and a niece and a nephew in the district, and people value it. 7.5%, again, at the first ask was 7.5%, but really it's untenable in this environment. And I would like to see the board and some of the other boards and commissions stand up and articulate that appropriately at town meeting so everyone can understand what we're trying to do. Because you know what? If the school budget gets voted no in two communities, it's a much easier situation to be in and we can go back and renegotiate. To Lyndon's point, even though an override protects our employees, it's going to crush some seniors in town that are living on fixed incomes. I mean, that's a lot of groceries, that number. So, I would like to see this resolved without having to raise taxes. It's something certainly that I would never vote for an override, but I do believe in giving the townspeople a voice in that. But it's just a horrible situation to be in. So. All right, if there's nothing else from the board, that's really an ongoing discussion that Ron's having with FinCom. I think what we're going to try to do is set up some joint meetings as we did prior to special to work out those recommendations that FinCom has once they start firming that up. Ron, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we need a vote up or down to put an override on the ballot because the reason it's on tonight's agenda is because
that's right.
It's the last day to discuss this. If you
tonight.
don't do it, it's going to mean at a town meeting, if the school budget is approved, that those cuts are going to occur, regardless of what we think. We won't have another opportunity to do an override. So this is our only chance to, in my opinion, to protect town governments if the school budget does pass. And we all know what's going to happen. All the teachers are going to show up. They're going to juice up their side, get them out the vote. And if you lose that vote, it puts the town side of government at real risk.
Lyndon.
I'm sure Anita can give us some clarification on this, but I believe even if we put it on the ballot, we can still kill it on the floor.
Yep.
So I mean, we won't have any options, as Ron said, after tonight. So I think we would continue to have options after this, even if we put it on the ballot.
To your point, Lyndon, you're absolutely correct. If we can vote down the school budget at the town meeting and force them to go out and cut their budget, then we could just simply say to the people, we don't have, the override doesn't matter anymore. But we've got to get there before we can do that,
Yeah. I'll entertain a motion from the board.
Motion placed.
Second, to to discuss. So do we have to, Anita, we have to designate the amount tonight? Is that correct?
Truthfully, in my opinion, I think you do. $400,000 got to be in the ballot. Anita can correct me. But I think $400,000, I'm convinced I can get us to 400 grand without damaging the town side significantly. I already know, again.
I just wanted to know what kind of flexibility there might be.
Yeah, I would say to do the $400,000 and I again, we have some things in mind to get us to that 400 grand. Truthfully, right now, I already know how to get us to within 80 grand of that 400 grand through the insurance thing that's going to be coming up on the agenda, through some refinancing of debt, through using 110 or 100 and some $1,000 of free cash. I can get us to the 400 in a reasonable way. And I feel the finance committee will work with me to do that. So I don't think it's kind of a all 680 or 400. You know, we do 400, we won't damage the town drastically.
I guess my concern is that you haven't finalized your cuts and how it's going to affect departments and everything. So I just want to have as much flexibility as possible in working with the departments to make sure we don't short anybody and that we take everything into consideration.
I totally think 400 is good.
I was just, if I may, I was similar to what Lyndon's saying. If we're doing an override, I want to make sure that it's not an override that's still taking a lot away from our town departments. Nobody wants the override. I think Lyndon said it perfectly earlier. We don't want the override and then have the salt on the wound of still having a decreased town government side because it wasn't enough. So
Waitman, let me be clear. I'll give you the numbers that I'm working with and how I get to where I'm at, so there's no misunderstanding, right? So originally, I got the cuts down to $660,546. The alternate health plan we're going to be discussing, if you vote to approve the alternate 2, will save $42,157. Debt service and principal, I've been working with the treasurer collector to look at refinancing some long-term debt. We believe that will save us an additional $39,000. Working with the town accountant who's on this call, talking about trying to find, we have about a $70,000 deficit in snow and ice this year. That we believe that, or we hope and we believe that we can fund that through transfers in this current year budget through 2021. For instance, we haven't used the $25,000 in reserve yet. So by balancing this budget at the end of the year, swiping accounts where we've underspent, we believe we can pay the snow and ice deficit. So that, if that's the case, right now we have $120,000 of free cash that we can utilize. If we were to utilize $100,000 of the 120 we have, that would put the deficit down to $479,389. So to get to that 400,000 number, I would need to cut an additional $80,000 to get to that 400. Now that's where the finance board, they got to show all the cuts. So they got to show the $80,000 plus another $400,000 in cuts. And that's where at town meeting, they're going to show that pain of eliminating police officers or whatever decisions they make. But I believe that an override at 400 would get us to where we need to be.
Chair. To me, those are a lot of still unacceptable cuts. If I understand, Ron, as far as the way you're going to balance it, are some of those through free cash and non-reoccurring revenues?
So normally the finance committee in the town had a policy of using $200,000 in free cash to balance the budget every year. What this proposes right now is using $100,000 to get us down to the 480. So the answer is we would make a significant half improvement of not using free cash as a revenue source for the budget. But we're not completely off of it. And my goal would be, as we move on over years, to get completely off of free cash. Yeah. But the town's policy right now.
It was always my understanding that we were getting away from non-reoccurring revenues.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
By any means. And I didn't think we were doing that any longer. So I have a concern about that as well.
No, that's the problem why we're at today is that we used $405,000 of free cash in the current year's budget to balance it, right? That's what you're referring to a non-reoccurring revenue. Okay, it's a one-time revenue.
I was not involved in either side of that.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
Anyway,
but that's what you're talking about is free cash is the one non-reoccurring revenue the town's been using. And in my opinion, it's a bad policy, but the policy has been in place every year to use 200. If we follow the course I'm asking, we will reduce that $200,000 down to 100,000. So we're going to improve where we're at, but we would still be using $100,000 to $120,000 in one-time revenue, which is a lot of towns do it, but it's not a good policy in my opinion.
Yeah, I would have to double check that because that was not my understanding that was our policy. But anyway,
Yeah, I think
that's
the finance
just another
chair
concern. So.
Yeah, the finance board chair is on it, and I mean, she said to me numerous times that we've been using generally $200,000 in free cash to balance the budget, and that a lot of towns do that. It's not unique. It's just not a great policy because when you have bad years like this, it causes significant problems. So I think this would make an improvement to that. But it's, I agree that a long term we need to get off free cash totally.
Skip and then Leah.
I made the motion for placing this article, and I'm going to put a number on it of 500,000. So if Lyndon's applicable to that, I wish you would second my motion.
So, may I comment, Mr. Chairman?
No, we have a motion. It's got to be resolved before we have any comment. Lyndon, you're on mute if you're trying to weigh in for your second.
My button's messed up. So I would just need clarification before I amend my second, Skip, and where you're coming up with the 500,000.
Well, with the numbers that are being all thrown around here, nobody really knows exactly for sure, for 100% sure of anything. We always can amend this number on the floor if, you know, if this, when we do this override, if it should happen.
The number, we're receiving where the number cannot be amended. It can just be stricken from the floor. I think if I can, Lyndon, there was, you had made a comment that the cuts were still unacceptable. And the 500, I think, if I can presume, Skip, would be to add some padding to ensure that we still do not have to make unacceptable municipal cuts in the case.
That's the idea. That's the general idea.
So if you'd like to amend your second to include that, if not, it sounds like there's not going to be a second, so the motion will fail. But we do have to do something tonight in order to get that onto the ballot.
So if I could comment.
I will amend it, but for a continued discussion, I would like to hear from Anita exactly on the mechanics of what our options are before we finalize this number.
Okay, Anita, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair. The town clerk's office has to be notified today, which is 35 days before the election. And the language of whether there's going to be a debt exclusion or an override, and the ballot will go to our vendor on Thursday morning. So that's why we need a figure before Thursday morning.
Ron.
So let me be clear, because this is, I think, really, really crucial. So again, I want to stress that the numbers I'm giving you are pretty damn accurate. The only question really is assuming you guys vote for the health plan that I'm recommending tonight and save that 42 grand. The free cash, the only real question, I'm pretty confident we can ask the town accountant, we would need to use money that's in the 2021 budget, leftover money, to pay down the snow and ice. But to get us to the 480,000 that I just gave you the numbers for, I think is really accurate. Now, I'll say this. The reason I say 400,000 is because the concept here is that we don't want to tax people. We're trying to keep the override as low as possible so the average homeowner doesn't get as large a tax bill. So the purpose of the $400,000 is to keep the tax bill down for people. That's why I asked for 400. And I'm very confident that we could find that $80,000 cut to get us to the 400. So if you do a 500, just means you're going to be taxing people more. And I really believe we can get to the number we need to be for 400. So it's up to you. It gives you a padding, but I'm not confident or worried that we can't cut that 80 grand.
Leah.
Thank you. A couple questions. I was wondering if the cuts getting us down to the 400,000 include stripping away the COLAs and steps and everything from the eligible employees. And a couple other questions. I guess if FinCom is on, if Karen is on and able to weigh in, I got kicked off the end of the FinCom meeting on Thursday night, so I didn't get to hear the kind of end of their discussion. If FinCom feels comfortable with the 400,000 number, or if they would like the wiggle room of up to 500. And that's my last question is, can it be up to 500,000? And then we're only taxing at the actual amount that we need that would not exceed 500.
No, because that number would have to be printed. That's my understanding, is we have to get it printed. So we wouldn't have the up to, because you can't vote on an up to, right, Anita? I mean, you'd have to have the actual number for the ballot.
Yes. So let me take the first
On
question.
that approach, I wish we could do it, but I don't think that's a possibility at this point.
So let me take your first question, Leo. To get to the $400,000 in my number, I don't think we would have to take those cuts to the non-union employees to get us to the 400. I think we can figure out to get us to $400,000 without doing that. The finance board right now is looking at those cuts for all the non-union employees who are not contracted and stuff. But, you know, like I said, I got us down to 480. We would have to find 80 grand without making the cuts you're suggesting to get us to the 400. But the big part of the finance committee's work, I think, is going to be what cuts do we have to make at the 400,000 level? Because I think each of those will be painful. And in that 400,000, they might cut those non-union salaries and stuff as part of that 400. But that the finance committee is not anywhere near that point yet. As to if Karen's comfortable or the finance committee is comfortable at the $400,000 level, I don't know that. You know, you can ask the chair of the finance committee, but I don't think the finance committee's had any kind of vote on that as of yet.
All right, so we have a motion in a second. I think we gotta move on this. You know, I really think, well, we have a motion in a second, so we're gonna have to vote unless those motions are rescinded. Prior to calling a vote, Jeff, I see you have your hand up, and then we'll have a roll call vote.
Yes, as part of the discussion, I'm just trying to figure out what exactly I'm going to be voting on here. We're kind of in a catch-22 because in order for the town to reject the override, it has to go to town meeting, correct? And so that we can be one of the two towns that stand up to the school. Ron's shaking his head.
To reject the school budget, that's a separate vote because that's a line item in the budget. The override itself goes to the town ballot for the election, where the general population will get to vote yes or no for the override. So there's a chance, Jeff, that, for example, the school budget will still pass and the override will fail, as they often have in this town and some other communities. And then we're going to have to make those cuts anyhow. But you know, the school budget would be a separate vote, and then the override, we're just tonight voting whether or not to place that override, which would provide additional protections to our employees, on the ballot, but it would result in the raising of taxes for residents.
But I guess what we don't factor in, as we've seen 2 meetings ago, is the stacked meeting where they come in, you know, people with their whatever, they stack the meeting, and then they can vote to amend that number from, you know, what we think we can afford to the full 7.5%. So is there any advantage for us not putting that on the town meeting for that vote to be stacked and or amended?
I would say this to you, Mr. Chairman. You don't have a choice, as I understand it, that the school committee's request for a budget number has to be put on the town meeting agenda. And you have a choice if you want to vote it up or down. If we wanted the school committee to reduce that number, 2 towns would have to vote to reject that number at the town meeting. And then they would have to go back and recalculate. I don't know how much, I don't know if they could just cut 50 grand and come back or what they would have to do, but they've got to go back and make a decision as to further reductions, right? The override, as the chair said, is on the ballot. And again, if the override is voted down, but even if we vote the budget vote will be contingent upon an override passing, although all the cuts will be on the town meeting agenda so people can see those cuts for that 400 grand. But the budget will be adopted subject to the override passing. And then if the override votes no, if the people vote no to the override, then the cuts are going to happen. We're just going to make the cuts. We'll have no choice because we won't have any money to fund the budget, is what it amounts to.
All right, Leah and then Lyndon.
I'll defer to Lyndon.
Okay.
There's two components that we really need to be considering. The number that we actually pass, the difference between that and the override. If the override fails and another town fails the school budget, the school can accept our lower number without the override and still go forward with the budget. So we could actually come down with a lower number, and the school would be forced either to accept that number or go back to the drawing board and start the budget process or go to a one budget. So that's something that we need to factor in, that the number that we set could be determining exactly what the school budget is.
So I think, Lyndon, that the finance committee could recommend any amount. The school budget has to be put on the warrant, right? But the school committee, let's say it's 600 and somewhere around 79,000 or whatever it is. The finance committee could vote to only recommend $350,000. And the finance committee hasn't gotten to the point to make that decision, but I know that's something that they're very seriously considering.
Lyndon.
So can I just respond? So my thought is the finance committee isn't going to support the school budget at all. So that's going to be a moot point. But what I'm saying is you can still present that number, but you can do part of it in an override. And whatever part we do in an override, if it fails, the only number the school can accept is the part that passed if another town votes down the budget. So they're forced to either accept our lower number or they'll have to go back. If it passes in all the other towns, then we're stuck and we have to pay it. But if another town votes it down and we accept a certain amount and the override doesn't pass, then we only are obligated to do that lower amount, is my understanding.
Okay, so what are we proposing that we do for the override? Because that's the decision we have to make tonight for the ballot. So we have a motion and a second. If neither of you want to amend your motion, the motion as it sits was amended to include $500,000 for the override to be placed on the ballot. Now our TA is telling us we need 400,000, and that would not result in devastating cuts, and it sounds like that would not potentially result in any waived COLAs or step increases that are already factored in. Do we want to amend the number back to 400, or would you like to stick with the 500,000? Because we can call a roll call vote right now, but it's going to include that 500,000 number.
Just
with the 500,000.
through the chair, I don't think that that's clear that the COLAs and the other steps aren't going to be cut by the finance committee when they have to make those cuts. They have not made those cuts yet.
They have
so
not.
I don't know where everybody thinks these are coming from.
The finance committee would provide recommendations on that, and they have not yet done that. But again, we need a number for the override this evening. So this is not an ideal situation to be in by any stretch of the imagination in terms of the budget. But we have to come up with a number for the override in order to save what's ostensibly going to be dozens of jobs on the town and of government.
Mr. Chair, did you notice Nancy Nichols raised her hand?
Nancy, go ahead.
Well, I just have a concern when it says not devastating cuts to the departments. Still $80,000. Where is it going to come from? Because the proposed budget already contains cuts that we made with Ron, but there's still cuts. So where will the rest come from?
We have a couple of items that we're going to be talking about. One after this about health insurance, and there's some money there that can be cut. I know FinCom had been talking about cutting the stipends for the boards. And that's a little bit, it's not much, but things like that. So I think that's where they're looking to get those numbers down. And Ron, you can further elaborate.
Yeah, I'll elaborate a quick 20,000, right? So the numbers I use to get us down to $479,389 is using $100,000 in free cash, Nancy. We technically have 120. If we don't use any of the free cash for last year's problems, then I could do 20,000. That would get us down to 459,000. So now I got to figure out 60 grand. 60 grand is not unbearable. It, you know, we can, I'm comfortable we can find someplace to cut 60 grand. But, you know, I don't have that answer for you at this moment if you're asking me. But 60 grand's a reasonable problem to deal with. We could relook at revenues we might be able to find. For instance, we increase fees for the zoning, for all the zoning, the building fees. We might be able to get another 5 grand there or something. So me and the town accountant would have to go back and reevaluate to see where we could nickel and dime our way to the 80 grand. But again, the pay cuts and the quotas and stuff could all still be in the $400,000 that the finance going to be committing. The finance committee would still have to find. I mean, the finance committee is still going to have to show all these cuts, and they're going to have to agree with whatever 60 grand that you know, how to make up that 60 grand. I still got to bring it to them and have them agree with me, but you know, they're reasonable, and you know, finance board has said to me that they're used to using $200,000 of free cash, so 120, I don't think they would blink too much of an eye about. But
no, and I understand that. I'm just still with it skimmed down like it is already. Does that mean, oh, we're just going to have to cut a couple of people, or we're just going to have to?
At 80 grand, or let's say it's 59 grand because we use the 20 additional grand of free cash. So we have 59 grand. You know, in theory, one person could, if you wanted to just eliminate a person, you could do that with one person. But I think we could probably find other ways to make that up.
Well, I hope so, because just one person is that one person's livelihood. And I'd rather see the whole amount be presented to the taxpayers. I realize whatever fails is still going to be a problem for us, but I don't think it should depend on a small group of people or 1 or 2 people if it can be spread out amongst all the taxpayers.
So assuming that this board votes for the alternate 2 healthcare plan tonight, they could change the amount to the override to be 480 grand. And that means I wouldn't have to find the 80 grand more in cuts, you know, that if you want to, but I'm not overly worried about the 80 grand, but if you wanted to do the full amount of deficit as it stands in my mind right now, using $100,000 in free cash, using the alternate 2 health plan that saves 42 grand, that would be about 480 grand. So if the board wanted to do that, that's fine too. I'm just trying to keep, I guess in my mind, I'm trying to keep the override as low as possible so it makes it easier to pass. The higher that override number is, the harder it's going to be to pass it. And I want it to pass because I want to protect the jobs.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I'm going to call a roll call vote. The motion and the second is for an amount of $500,000 as of right now. All right, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings.
Clarification, sir. The motion is to put it before the town.
The motion is to put it on the ballot. That is correct.
On the ballot before the town.
In the amount of $500,000.
All right. Am I to put it on the, put it before the people? Aye.
Sorry? Okay. Whiteman.
Whiteman, aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Nichols.
Nichols, aye to place, but without support.
Resity, aye to place, again, without support and disapproval. And Tamika, make sure you get that in the minutes, please. Thank you.
That's what I was going for, Mr. Chair. So my sentiments also. Aye to place.
I got it.
Thank you. It's very appreciated. At least we have some options now. And the people in town now can make a decision if they want to support the budget or if they want the cuts. It's now, I think it's kind of in their hands, not directly just in the selectmen and the finance committee's hands. So we'll see what the people do.
Okay. Thank you all for that. That was a robust discussion. We'll whip through the rest of these real quick. We have a possible action on insurance advisory committee on adopting an insurance deductible. Ron, do you want to walk us through that?
Yeah, Becky's on here, and I'm going to ask Becky to be the more detailed one. But we have an insurance advisory committee made up of different representatives of town employees and stuff. And we have advisors from Maya who help us look at current health plans and potential options. And Rebecca and Maya went through that as leaders of the insurance advisory committee, made recommendations. Becky, I'll let you do the recommendations and then I'll give my recommendation after you explain what happened, okay? If it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, to let our treasurer go through it.
Yes.
Okay, can you all hear me? Okay, so as sent you the letter that kind of describes the whole process as it went through this year. Maya came in November and was predicting a 9% increase for our health insurance benefits for our employees. In January, when they ran their numbers, the Maya is part of a health benefits trust where they have funds kind of in escrow or in a foundation where they can put it into their rates and reduce them. They came back with a rate range of like 6.8 was the highest to, I think the lowest was 3 or something to that effect. Based on our claims for this year and the last 2 years we've been with Maya, our rate came in at the highest, the 6.8%. So I went back to Maya and asked their opinion of alternatives, changes that we could make to the plan to reduce that 6.8% increase. And that was provided to you in the documents. They gave us 4 different alternatives for the plans. One was increasing co-pays more. Alternative 2 was to add a deductible to the plan, $250 for an individual and $750 for a family. And alternate 3 was to increase the deductible to have a higher deductible, $300 for an individual and $900 for family. In the packet that I gave you, the IAC met twice. It shows what we discussed, and I showed them the changes. The 6.8% increase is about a dollar value change over the FY21 budget of about $34,000. Alternate 1 was just by increasing the co-pays, we reduced the increase from 6.8 to a 6.27% increase. With alternate 2, that is the most budget savings with the least impact to employees. It reduced the increase to 0.93%, and but it added the deductible not for regular office visits at the doctor. There's a $250 deductible that would come into play when employees or family members had to go have, per se, like a MRI or special diagnostic treatment, or had to be, go into the ER. They would pay the first $250 for each individual in the family. For a family, it's up to $750 for the year. And then the insurance would kick in with their regular plan benefits that we have. And that, by taking that option, which increases the deductible only 0.93%, it's about a $42,000 savings from using the 6.8% increase. So in the discussions with the IAC, they took a vote to recommend to you that they wanted to stay with no plan changes and take the 6.8% increase. They also voted, there is an option that Maya presented to also reduce the plan another 0.5% if we offer a vision plan with 100% employee contribution. That would reduce that premium even more. We'd have to have 10% of our employees, eligible employees, enroll in that. But they also voted to offer that to the employees in hopes that we could reduce the premiums more. They voted unanimously to recommend the dental plan as is, because that came back with a 0% increase, and also to offer the FSA plan that we currently offer the town contributes 100%, $150 to each individual that enrolls in the FSA plan. So I presented to you what the IAC recommended for benefits. And also I am talking to Ron, and with the budget situation the way it is, the most benefit savings to the town, or budget savings to the town, would be to go with the 0.93% increase with the adding the deductible to our plan.
I'm sorry.
I didn't know.
Is there the alternative 3 looked like it was more financially beneficial than the alternative 2?
It is, and that increases the, right now the plan has, our plans have no deductible. So alternative 3 increases or starts off with a deductible at $300 for an individual and $900 for a family. So in order to have, we could go with that, but there would be even more impact to the employees in the adjustments of the deductible plan. So this is more of a middle of the road starting point for the deductible plan, so that employees could kind of get a feel for the deductibles apply if you use them. So the people, unfortunately, the people that are going to use the plan are going to pay for the deductibles, but they're going to save if they don't have to go to have an MRI or have these special treatments, they would not have to pay the deductible. So alternative 3 does save more, but I think this is kind of a stepping stone to introduce a deductible plan to our employees without pushing it.
I mean, your max out of pocket doesn't change, and your max out of pocket doesn't change between those 2 plans. And
it does.
The max out of pocket for alternative 2 and alternative 3 are $2,500 and $5,000.
No, up at the top, it's the
deductible, but your max out of pocket at the culmination of the deductibles is the same.
That's correct.
So,
and that's existing in the plans right now, that max out of pocket. But it's the deductible that's the different part. So the deductible would be the beginning. We're suggesting that we start at the $250 per individual level instead of the $300 per individual level.
Because you might not reach that max out of pocket expense, so the deductible will still cost you more because you might not reach the max.
I mean, even the alternative 2s and 3s are better than the average plan that a private citizen has. So I want to make that very clear in terms of the max out of pocket and the deductible, that these are really low limits. So it's just, yeah.
I did talk to a couple different towns through the chair, sorry, that a lot of towns already have deductibles built into their plans just to try and keep we all know interest rates, sorry, health insurance rates go up every year. So it's always a budget constraint, and towns are always looking to see what they can do to change things. And it's pretty standard to have a deductible in the plans.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I want to give my recommendation now. First of all, let's be clear that as of today, the town pays 75% of the annual premium, and the employees pay 25%. Again, you're right, Mr. Chairman. You don't find that in the private sector. That is a very good benefit for municipal employees. I was disappointed during the IAC meeting because I was hoping this is an area where the town and the employees could really work together for both parties to save money, because the employees are going to have to pay a 6.8 increase in premium, or if they went with this deductible, it would only be a 0.93% increase to their premium. So it's a savings for most employees. Now, let's be clear that those employees who have a major medical problem where they had to go to the emergency room or an ambulance, the high cost event, are going to have to pay the additional $250 in deductible. Now, also, and I'm not sure the program, maybe Becky can talk to it, but the town has a program where it kicks in an additional $150 towards that deductible anyway. So they're going to pay $100. If they sign up to that program, they're only going to pay $100 in deductible cost. Now, I'll say to you that when discussing this with the employees, it really was an issue of looking at the 6.8% versus the 0.93%, the benefits of all that. For them, it wasn't a town budget issue like it is for us tonight, for the selectmen. You guys are actually deciding on the saving of that $42,157 as a budget issue too. And I would say to you this is going to be the easiest reduction that you're going to be making in this budget. You or the finance committee will be making, because at least here employees get a benefit. They're going from 6.8 down to 0.93%. So in my mind, as a budget item, this is the easiest vote you guys are going to take. I don't, frankly, I think in a personal level, if I had to vote for this and it impacts me as well, I probably would have voted for the 0.93% anyway, because I'm hoping I don't get sick and I don't ever have to worry about a deductible. But at the end of the world, having a $250 deductible is not going to kill anybody when it comes to the total cost of your healthcare. I mean, it's outrageous. You're talking on a bill that might be thousands and thousands of dollars. You get stuck with $250 or maxing at $750 for the family. I think it's reasonable, and I would ask the board to vote to adopt alternate 2 and get that savings. And then, of course, most employees will benefit from that as well.
Okay. Leah.
I have a couple of questions. I understand the cost savings, and I watched the recording from the IAC meeting per Ron's suggestion. And I think that committee had some valid concerns that they feel kind of that they get a lot taken from them as employees as a whole with the costs, the COLA increases and everything. That's one of my points, is to making sure that those were able to be maintained. But they had asked Ron, I think, about the impact to the budget, and I thought Ron had said it was $30,000 to $40,000, and it wasn't going to make it or break it. Which to them, then they felt like, why should we? If it's not going to make or break anything, then why should we why not keep what we have? And they're worried about going into a deductible plan and then having that deductible plan continue to have the deductibles raised year after year after year. So I guess I understand the cost saving sides of things. I wish that would have been presented a little bit more clearly to the IAC committee throughout, because I didn't get that impression through when I watched that meeting. And I think we need to be mindful that there is a committee, and these are people that are made up of the various aspects of our town employees, and that we want to make sure that their voice is heard and appreciated. Maybe we don't agree with it, but we need to make sure that we're not just disregarding their voice entirely.
So let me comment to that, Leah, because you're right, and I made those points, so I want to make it very, very clear. From their point of view, the IAC, they weren't voting on a budget issue and a budget savings issue. They had a decision, and I didn't want the budget issue to be a factor for them, because they have to make their recommendation based upon the plans in front of them. And truthfully, as much as $42,157 means a lot to us in trying to balance the budget, but when you look at a $680,000 deficit, it's not big potatoes, but it's important in what we're trying to do. Now, I kind of was stumped when I heard the comments that were made at that meeting, and the reason I wanted you to listen to it, because last I don't know a single union employee that's taken any cuts. Matter of fact, if I look at the union contracts, and I haven't studied them all yet, but every union contract got a minimum of a 2% raise. A number of the unions got 3% raises in the third year. They're all getting benefits at 75%, 25% in terms of premium sharing. I couldn't for the life of me thinking about what cuts that this employee was talking to that they've suffered from. Now, you're right, there's potential cuts on the table that haven't even occurred yet, but I don't know of any employees, particularly union employees, that have taken any cuts. They benefited pretty well by the union contracts that this board voted for. So I was a little mystified at those kind of comments. Now, in this budget discussion we're having, we're not even talking about the union employees because they're under contract. So the person was speaking about union stuff, and right now, the people that are worried about getting COLAs cut are the non-union staff, not the union people. So if I was a non-union member, I'd be more saying, oh God, we could take a potential cut, than the union people who got raises, COLAs, steps, increases in various stipends and things. I don't see where the union employees have taken any cuts that they should, be upset at what the Board of Selectmen or town government has done in terms of them. They've benefited pretty well.
Yeah, again, I just want to, not to be the canary in the coal mine here. We have a $400,000 deficit that we're looking, and that's after we save this $42,000 if we go that route. I mean, that's a position. That's a person, that's a policeman, that's a fireman.
That's right.
So I can understand wanting to give the best possible plan In reality, these plans we're looking at have no difference except the deductible. And 95% of insurance policies existing in the world today in the United States have a deductible amount. It amazes me that I would come work for the town if I knew there wasn't a health insurance deductible, but it's a very small deductible. And I think that if you're looking at the most savings with the max benefit to the employees or the least impact, I think that that's the fiscally responsible thing to do. And it sounds like that is what, you know, Becky and Ron have come up with in terms of their homework with this. And I would not expect an employee board to advocate for anything other than something that would be more beneficial to them, because they are not taking into consideration the budget.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something we have to do.
Can I make one more point, Mitch?
Yes.
Just in terms of if with this 0.93% increase, I mean, compared to the increase just on the employee side, most of our employees are enrolled in the HMO New England family plans. If they stick with the 6.8% increase versus or go with the 9.3%, the savings annually for one of our employees on the family plan is $347.
So again, that's more than the deductible amount.
That's their paycheck, yeah.
Right. So they're saving money on the paycheck by adopting this plan. It's just the deductible amount that changes. For a majority of our employees, they're probably actually going to be coming out ahead if we adopt the recommended plan versus the plan with no deductible. Correct. Which, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. Yeah, I mean, you're benefiting the majority of your employees and you're having the least financial impact. It seems like it's a pretty easy decision on our end.
I guess if I may, I'm just a little bit frustrated with the process. If we have a committee and they specifically asked if it was there are budgetary issue concerns and how that would be helpful to the town or not, and they're told something different, and they make a recommendation that we should be taking under consideration.
Okay, then Leah, make a motion. If you want to go with the committee's recommendation, make a motion. We have to make a decision. If you're going to just voice concern about the process, I understand that, and that's duly noted. But we have to make a decision based on the budget. So if you want to make a motion to go with the committee's recommendation, we can vet that motion. Okay. I mean,
well, Mitch, if she doesn't want to make the motion, I will make the motion that we do alternate 2 Network Blue 0.93%.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Whitman, second.
Alternate discussion.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm just clarifying. So alternate 2 is the TA's recommendation? And
Yes.
it's not concurred with Becky, right? Becky's recommendation is the committee's recommendation?
No,
Is it the same? Is it the same?
Becky wasn't on the committee. There was a individual committee that was tasked with looking at that. Is that correct, Becky?
I act as the chairman of the committee, but I'm not a voting member because I have the contacts with all the insurance. So I kind of gather the information and provide it to the committee so that they can bring it back to their employees and communicate it. We did have a meeting on the 3rd, March 3rd, and on the 24th, just to Leah's point. And there was a new committee member that joined at the last minute and was only present at the 324 meeting. So, but I did provide all of the minutes to the 3 meeting and all of the information that was discussed to that new member. But my recommendation is also the personally, because in working with Ron and the financial situation, I mean, we're looking at $42,000 and if you look at what the average employee is saving, the majority of them are on the family plan. It's $347 a year. That maybe not all of them will have to pay a $250 deductible.
So again, just for the sake of clarity, because I know that health insurance can be kind of confusing because we all have to go through the process and get it. What we're proposing through the alternative 2 has the potential to save our employees and their families money on a year-to-year basis, and it saves the town $42,000. So it seems like a pretty clear-cut win for everyone. So Lyndon, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I understand Leah's point, but also having been on the finance side of it, I understand the need to make these kind of cuts, and it does have, you know, an impact on the budget. And it is a shame because it typically is always affecting the non-union employees, and you know, it certainly will affect some of them more than others. But I also understand the need to make decisions that are going to cut our expenses. So.
Okay. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings.
Stillings, aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Nichols.
Nichols, aye with regret.
Whitman.
Whitman, aye with regrets.
And City, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
Can I just ask for, I do have just want to recommend also that we offer the vision, take a vote that we offer the vision plan, which we could get an additional 0.5% decrease on the premium if we get people enrolled. That will be 100% employee funded. The dental plan as is, and the FSA with the $150 town match. If we could just get a motion to accept those.
I'd like to make a motion to include the extended plan.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Sorry, was it the entire dental, eye dental in the FSA? That was the whole package that was the motion in the second?
Yep.
I guess I said I, so sorry, so I and dental extended plan.
Okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings.
Stillings, aye.
Whitman.
Whitman, aye.
Nichols.
Nichols, aye.
Clark.
Aye.
And City, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Okay, thank you, everyone. Last order of regular business is the K9 Foundation Road Race one-day liquor license request. Do we have all of the necessary paperwork for that? That was received?
Yeah, I believe in talking to Beth today about it, she believed it was fine. Usually you go through the process of asking the police chief as one of the processes to get approved. And this is actually, I think, sort of being sponsored by the police chief. So it's a one-day liquor permit. And I've heard no objection whatsoever from anybody about this particular permit.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve one-day liquor license request. And because it's being given by the foundation, to waive the associated fee.
Nichols, second.
All right, motion and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Stillings.
Stillings, aye. Thank you.
Nichols.
Nichols, aye.
Whitman.
Whitman, aye.
Clark.
Aye.
And City, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And we have two items of correspondence: a MIAA renewal and a COVID vaccine.
I'm sorry, Mitch, but I think the chief had his hand up.
Oh, Chief, go ahead.
Yeah, I was also looking for a blessing from the board just to use the town property on that date.
Stillings, so moved.
Second.
Nichols, second.
Okay, we'll have a roll call vote. Again, I don't think we need it, but we'll do it just as a show of support. Stillings.
Stillings, aye.
Nichols.
Nichols, aye.
Whitman.
Whitman, aye.
Clark.
Aye.
And City, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Mitch, could I just ask the date just so I can note it in the minutes?
Chief, you want to give us I don't have it in front of me.
Sure, the date is May 8th. Yes, it's the same day as town meeting, but we'll be all cleaned up before that at 11 a.m. And also, just for the record, the one-day liquor license was petitioned by the K9 Foundation, not by me as police chief.
So are people going to show up to town meeting all lubed up and dehydrated, Chief? Is that your plan?
I hope not.
Okay.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, we have two items of correspondence, an MIA renewal request and a COVID vaccine clinic staff postings.
Just brief comments, I guess, Mr. Chairman, if you want. Just that obviously the Myers thing is something we do every year until we rebid insurance. It's sort of a typical renewal form, nothing amazing about The job posting is for the COVID clinic. I talked with the fire chief, really in this case, let's call him the emergency management director because it falls under him, with the health director and the chairman of the board of health and the health agent to make sure that we posted for these positions publicly so that everybody would have a fair shot at doing this. They particularly posted in the COVID center where there's a bunch of volunteers. We've had, as you know, up to 200 volunteers. And I think that the hope is that some of the volunteers, we're going to have paid positions being that they're volunteering, they would have first shot at some of these part-time jobs that we're doing. It's all being paid by FEMA money, but I asked them to provide you a copy of the posting so that you knew that this was going out to the general public. And that's it, Mr. Chairman.
If we don't have any questions, I'll entertain. Lyndon, you have a hand up.
Just for clarification, Mitch, so there's no benefits or anything like that? These are only part-time temporary jobs?
Yeah, these are part-time positions, no benefits. They're completely funded by FEMA. And actually, just to make it clear, it's the emergency management director under the emergency of the COVID that actually does the hiring in this situation. Under, it's my understanding under the law that the fire chief, being emergency management director, has the power to hire individuals under this. But he is working with the health agent and the health board chair to make sure that they're comfortable that there is a good process in place.
Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion adjourned.
Second. I don't know if people wanted to stay that long.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Second. That motion almost failed.
So we don't have to, Mitch, we don't have to take a vote on any of that? The postings or anything?
Oh, that's normal.
No, we have no jurisdiction over those postings,
Yeah,
and
okay.
the MIA is normal. So,
Yeah.
okay,
Well,
have a roll call.
leaving, so I guess.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to, anybody else before we adjourn? Okay, so a motion and a second, no further conversation. Let's have a roll call vote. Stillings.
Stillings, aye.
Nichols.
Nichols, aye. Thank you. Good night.
Whiteman.
Whitman, aye. Good night.
Clark.
Aye.
And Rossetti, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, everybody, and have a good week.